Chapter 1666. Inside the mysterious sea, the divine power of the 6 heavenly Tao magic cubes was working together, and the superimposed power formed a sword pressure that could be described as crushing, which was unimaginably shocking. It was true that Wang Ling now had the remaining 3 cubes of Tao ancestor Wang's primordial Rubik's Cube, which meant that it was only a matter of time before the mysterious sea would become a genuine, 9-cores spirit sword. But even with 3 missing, the pressure was still enough to make one's hair stand on end. How could this be? Led by Jinan, the leader of this group of new ancient divine weapons, everyone was dumbstruck for a moment, their eyes wide and round, very much like the scene in the first episode of The Deer and the Cauldron when Wei Xiaobao was telling the story. How could a girl who was only at the foundation establishment stage be able to control this spirit sword that had been fused with 6 heavenly Tao magic cubes? At that moment, Jinan realized that his memory was starting to go haywire, because his mind was blank and he couldn't think of a way to deal with this situation at all. The girl with the 6 cores mysterious sea was too powerful. Just by standing there, her body emitted a tsunami of sword pressure, which was as powerful as the end of the world. All of them froze in place and couldn't move a muscle. This was also the first time that Lotus Sun had fully revealed her strongest battle strength in front of outsiders. She hadn't reached such an outrageous level when she had beheaded Old God with her sword earlier, but she was clearly stronger now. No one could have imagined that a foundation establishment cultivator would actually be able to use a spirit sword to boost her battle strength to the level of a monster. That was right. At that moment, in the eyes of these new ancient divine weapons led by Jinan, Lotus Sun was an out-and-out monster. This couldn't go on, they had to think of a way. Watching Lotus Sun approach him step by step, Jinan began to forcibly control his body, which had been stiffened by the sword pressure. At the same time, the new ancient divine weapons below him, who could also be called androids, did the same thing. They were too close to Lotus Sun to be able to move, so they could only forcibly remove their rigidity and then put as much distance between them as possible. But this was a ridiculous and face-slapping action. Because before coming here, Jinan had thought that this would be an extremely easy task. Even though this Mr. Gong was very strong, they had the advantage in numbers. It was not impossible for them to subdue him and bring him back to that lord alive and unharmed. But now, Jin too felt that the situation had completely changed. Listen to my command, set up the formation. As long as he could ensure that Gong Xianqing was alive. Even if he broke his limbs and crippled him. As long as he's alive, we don't need to think about anything else, Jinan ordered. This was an act of helplessness. Originally, they wanted to bring Mr. Gong, alive and unscathed to Na Wei. But now, it was clearly impossible. This was a battle where they had to give it their all. The necessary casualties were unavoidable. Hardly had Jin Tu concluded his sentence when more than 10 golden arrows of spiritual energy darted out of the holes and cut apart the space like waves, plowing black cracks in the void that the arrows passed through. This was the battle prowess of a quasi-Tao god, and tearing apart space was a common occurrence. These golden arrows flashed through the void at a speed invisible to the naked eye with terrifying power. Dragging along hideous spatial cracks, they were poignant yet gorgeous as they shot toward Lotus Sun from multiple directions. If these powerful spiritual energy arrows collided with the roof, the huge explosion would instantly raze the mansion to the ground. Lotus Sun stood on the roof. Mysterious Sea's sword chi had already completely covered the entire imperial city, and she could clearly sense the positions of these dozen androids, including the barrier that they had deliberately set up around the mansion before coming here. This was to prevent accidents like this from happening when they attacked, and the impact of the explosion would spread elsewhere. But this was actually helping Lotus Sunday. She stood solemnly in place. With Mysterious Sea's sword chi protecting her body and the eternal illumination spell that monk Jin Deng had cast on her during the Yin and Yang death calamity incident, the strength of her body had reached an incredible level. Buzz! Mysterious Sea's protective sword chi was automatically released, forming an eggshell-shaped sword barrier with a radius of 8 feet. These golden arrows that came from all directions couldn't even break through the sword barrier in the end. When they were within 8 feet of Lotus Sun, it was as if time had stopped and they were frozen in the air, unable to move forward even half a step. And then, a horrifying scene occurred. These golden arrows with tremendous energy were actually swallowed up by Lotus Sun's protective sword Chi. Like a clay ox falling into the sea, they fell into the boundless and deep ocean, and were quickly submerged without a trace. At this moment, Jin's mind went blank once again. He looked at Lotus Sun's emotionless face, and as he was shaken by this sight, he also sensed the girl's gaze. It was a kind of contempt that completely looked down on them. "Looks like it's my turn now," the girl said. At this moment, Mysterious Sea's sword was already filled with a mysterious azure color. It was sparkling and translucent, and it was incomparably brilliant. It had the depth of the boundless ocean, and at the same time, it was exuding a boundless aura of life. Devastatingly beautiful sword. She spoke indifferently, and with an extremely graceful and beautiful body, she brandished the azure sword and drew a circle around herself. The last time she had used this powerful devastatingly beautiful sword was when Mysterious Sea and Bai Qiao had fused together. But now, because Mysterious Sea had 6 heavenly Dao magic cubes, this devastatingly beautiful sword had already become her most common skill. The only difference was that last time, it had been a straight slash. She had slashed out sword Chi over 10,000 meters. But this time, it was a circular sword Chi that slashed out around her. It was like a gorgeous waltz, and the moment it was unleashed, it made people's scalps go numb. Of course, she had even more powerful moves, such as the devastatingly beautiful sword or the devastatingly beautiful sword, but if she used these 2 more powerful moves now, Lotus Sun was a little worried that the barrier that these people had set up around the mansion would be directly shattered by her move, and the innocent residents would be affected. Rumble. The circular sword Chi of the devastatingly beautiful sword rushed out, carrying with it a supersonic sound wave that even a Dao god's hearing couldn't hear as it slashed out in all directions. The 16 androids, including Jin too, looked horrified. For each and every one of them, this was completely out of their league. It wasn't something they could deal with. Even their battle strength wasn't on the same level. Although they were androids that had been created and were just tools to follow orders, they also cherished their lives. After realizing that they had completely underestimated this Mr. Gong's battle strength, everyone's first thought was to retreat. But Mysterious Sea's sword Chi was really too fast. It swept out in all directions, sweeping away 1,000 enemies. Just as the 16 androids were about to retreat, their line of sight suddenly tilted. It turned out that their heads had already been separated from their bodies, 16 quasi-Dao God level heads. In that instant, they all fell to the ground. Chapter 1667. There was no blood, only the stench of oil flowing across the air, very much like the feeling when refueling a car at a gas station. In the face of the sudden devastatingly beautiful sword, Jin too, and the group of androids on the ground had no time to react, and their heads fell to the ground one after another. As androids, their insides were all created with high-precision machinery, so even if their heads were separated from their bodies, they wouldn't die immediately. Of course, if it was an ordinary decapitated head, with their regenerative ability, they could completely control their bodies to pick up the head and reattach it. However, it was a pity that the young girl was more cautious than they had imagined. When the sword Chi from the alluring sword swept over, it directly destroyed the sensory nerves in their bodies, causing the mental connection between their heads and their bodies to be completely severed. Right now, they were completely isolated and helpless. Of course, Lotus Sun's caution was far more than that. At this moment, she took another step forward and stabbed Mysterious Sea into the ground. A huge vortex formed in the field and accurately locked onto the 16 fragmented bodies here. One body after another uncontrollably gathered from all directions due to the suction force of the vortex. Then, they were sucked into the vortex, just like fruits that were sucked into a juicer. In an instant, they were smashed into pieces and turned into dust. Thus, in less than a few seconds, the bodies of Jin too and the others also disappeared, leaving only their round heads. It was only now that Jin too realized what kind of devil he had offended. Too cruel, why was there such a terrifying guy? Mr. Daikas, did you kill him? Answer me honestly, or I'll get angry. At this moment, Lotus Sun leaned over and stared at Jean Tu's head. Jean Tu sweated. Yes, very good. Seeing Jean Tu directly admit it, Lotus Sun immediately nodded. For every debt, there was a debtor. As a veteran, Naoki Sawa, Lotus Sun understood the principle of an eye for an eye. Using another, mobile version of the Vortex Attraction spell, Lotus Sun gathered all the 16 heads together and hovered behind her like the truth-seeking ball in some cartoon. If she had to describe it, this scene reminded Ryoko of a hero named Syndra in the League of Legends. Monk Jin Deng understood. He knew what Lotus Sun wanted to do, so he took a step forward and opened the huge wine barrel that contained Daikas's body. The remnant body inside had already been successfully transcended by Monk Jin Deng, leaving nothing behind. Monk Jin Deng put his palms together, his face full of Buddhist light and benevolence. Amitba, without another word, Lotus Sun threw the gathered heads one by one into the wine barrel. The golden bear android was the last to be thrown in. Seeing that Lotus Sun was about to close the lid, he immediately panicked. What are you doing? And the one with the Buddha's light over there. You monks are not compassionate. To deliver all living beings from suffering? Jin Deng looked up at Jin Nu and said, those with souls are living beings. You don't even have souls, so what kind of living beings are you? These words caused Jin to be speechless. They thought they were humans, but in reality, they were just machines with a certain level of artificial intelligence created by Na Wei. Was it sad? Maybe a little bit, that was what she thought. At that moment, Monk Jin Deng's heart was also in turmoil. He felt that Lotus Sun had always been a kind girl, but when it came to major issues, she was more clear about gratitude and grudges than he had imagined, and had the air of a chivalrous woman. This made him a little happy, and he felt that Lotus Sun had really matured a lot. Rong, what on earth? At that moment, the only person at the scene who was dumbfounded was Jamiya Ryoko. She felt like she was on the verge of breaking down. She couldn't understand why Lotus Sun had suddenly become so strong, and so ridiculously strong. Ryoko, I didn't mean to hide it from you. So did Senior Ajua. I've always told him not to tell you. Anyway, this is a good opportunity, so why don't we let him explain it to you? Lotus Sun took Jamiya Ryoko's hand and said. She then looked outside the hall. Senior Ajua, you're here, right? Don't hide outside, I sensed you a long time ago. Ajua, who was hiding underground by a haystack outside the house, couldn't help sighing. What was meant to come would always come, because Jamiya Ryoko had always thought that Wang Ling was her disciple. He felt that this wonderful misunderstanding was actually pretty good. At the very least, it could help explain a lot of things. Of course, Ajua was also well aware that the truth couldn't be hidden forever. He and Jamiya Ryoko had already established their relationship, and they planned to continue this path in the future, so he had to take this step in the end. Even though he was a little surprised by the way things had developed, but now, Ajua felt that it was time for him to act like a man and explain everything to Jamiya Ryoko. On the other side a few minutes ago, Wang Ling was playing with a gold coin bulldozer in the game hall of the Imperial City. He was holding a coin, and his hands suddenly paused in the air. He could sense the fluctuations of sword chi from Lotus Sun's alluring sword. It seemed that a fight had already broken out over there. Furthermore, it was a crushing blow. Wang Ling didn't know why he had suddenly paid attention to the situation over there while he was playing the game. But after learning that Lotus Sun's side was progressing smoothly, he felt a lot more at ease, and then turned his attention back to the gold coin bulldozer in front of him. This was already the 16th gold coin bulldozer that Wang Ling had emptied. The game coins that Wang Ling had earned were piled up into 3 full sacks. There were as many as 100,000 of them. According to the game hall's calculations, these 100,000 game coins could all be converted into gold gear coins at a 110 exchange rate. There were actually quite a few throwing techniques for playing the gold coin bulldozer, and Wang Ling's technique was to attach a magnetic force to the coin that was being thrown as he threw it. As a result, as soon as the coin entered the bulldozer, no matter where it was, it would immediately form an avalanche and push all the game coins out of the bulldozer. Mr. Jean, do you still want to continue? The first few machines that have been emptied have already been filled with new game coins. The person in charge of the game hall wiped his cold sweat and stood respectfully next to Wang Ling. His immediate superior was Jia Bugui. Usually, whenever Wang Ling appeared in the game hall, Jia Bugui would tremble in fear and reprimand them for using all sorts of methods to get rid of Wang Ling. Like the owners of other video game halls, almost all of them who had been robbed by Wang Ling suffered from a disease that made them twitch uncontrollably at the sight of Wang Ling, commonly known as the godly Jinshan disease. The person in charge had thought that Jia Bugui's attitude would be the same as before. But who knew that when he went to report today, Boss Jia seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood. Not only did he not stop him, he even sent someone to play with this Mr. Jean to his heart's content. The most outrageous thing was that this play had no limits. Jia Bugui had already given him an order. Even if Wang Ling swept away all the game coins in his game hall today, even if the game hall directly closed down and lost everything, he would still play with him. When the person in charge of the game hall heard this, he was dumbfounded on the spot. Boss, are you serious? Just a few minutes ago on the phone, he confirmed with Jia Bugui again. Little did he know that Jia Bugui, who had picked up the phone, said righteously, "Of course I'm serious." After all, this was his little brother's birthday. If his little brother wanted to play, of course he would play with him. In any case, even if the game hall closed down, it wasn't his money that was being spent. Chapter 1668. When the news of the death of the 16 neo-ancient mystical armaments, led by Jin Tu, was transmitted to Na Wei's brain through the mental connection hub, he felt a slight tingling sensation. This tingling sensation had no effect on the body itself, and it merely expressed a signal that the mental connection hub had been completely disconnected. This meant that the 16 quasi-Dao God neo-ancient mystical armaments, led by Jin Tu, were completely hopeless. The material of the neo-ancient mystical armaments was very special, and it had the ability to regenerate. Under normal circumstances, even if it was severely damaged, it could still be salvaged. Even if a part of its body was lost and its regenerative ability was restricted, as long as there was more than 30% of its mechanical tissue left, it could still survive. In other words, as long as there was at least 30% of its mechanical tissue left, it would not be to the point where the mental connection hub was directly disconnected. Na Wei's face was filled with disbelief. He did not expect that the combined combat power of Jin Tu and the others he had sent would not be able to defeat that gong. However, this made him feel even more excited. This proved that his judgment was right. This, Mr. Gong, was indeed a good material for him to further realize the ultimate version, neo-ancient mystical armament. Of course, the defeat of Jin Tu and the others also made Na Wei reflect. He felt that in terms of battle prowess, Jin Tu and the others should not be crushed. Perhaps it had something to do with the order he had given them at the beginning, to bring back Mr. Gong alive. It caused Jin Tu and the others to be restrained when they made their move, allowing the other party to find an opportunity. From the looks of it, there seemed to be no need to be restrained anymore. Back then, his master, the Heartless Patriarch, was an existence that was worshipped as the underworld soul chaser. Even a dead person could be saved within 48 hours with his uncanny mechanical parts. Of course, it would be best if he could be captured alive, as that would save Na Wei a lot of trouble. However, there was no need for that now. Pass down my order. At this moment, Na Wei pondered for a moment and said to the spherical guards in front of him, "I want to release the containment device." This order stunned the ball-shaped guards, because this was a very dangerous move. They needed Na Wei to give another order to confirm the procedure. A spherical guard issued a warning with an electronic voice, "Release containment command detected." This command may lead to unpredictable danger. The containment creatures are currently in an uncontrollable state. Under this castle, there were countless strange creatures that had been taken in. In order to conduct experiments on the ancient divine weapon, the Wuxin clan patriarch had forcefully imprisoned them in a specific Rubik's Cube container. They were strange, powerful, and had certain weaknesses, but they could not be completely killed, I know. Na Wei smiled and said, "There has been no way to deal with these guys effectively. Mr. Na Wei Gong is so strong, so he must have a way to deal with them, right? Borrow his hand to make those living beings consume a portion of their physical strength, and at the same time, wear down his own strength. In the end, send out the new neo-ancient divine armaments to surround him, and he will definitely be brought to me." At this point, the spherical guards already knew what Na Wei wanted to do. It was nothing more than exhausting each other's physical strength, and in the end, reaping the benefits of a third party. However, it was hard to say whether it would be so smooth in practice. This was because the abilities of those creatures were strange and abnormally cruel. Not only were they not easy to control, they could easily harm innocent people. However, Na Wei seemed to be particularly confident about this. "It's fine. That Mr. Gong seems to be a warm-hearted person. To deal with such a warm-hearted person, it would be more interesting to leave these uncertain factors in the past. Even if something really happens to someone, at most, we'll just lose money. For the future development of the Imperial City, sometimes necessary sacrifices are needed." "Then how do you want to release the creatures?" "Directly use the teleportation technique to send the Rubik's Cube that is used to contain them over. Of course, set up the automatic release program before sending it over." "Understood." At this moment, the spherical guard's light flickered, and immediately projected the light from its mechanical eyes. Accompanied by the constantly jumping numbers in the void, a series of information about the creatures and the corresponding containment number were clearly projected in the void. The spherical guard said, "Sir, please choose which of the creatures to release first." Na Wei rubbed his chin and chuckled. "SCP-096, let's activate it for now." SCP-096 was an ancient Dao God realm creature, and its current realm strength had reached the Quasi-Dao ancestor realm. This was a strange fellow that his Shifu, the heartless ancestor, had captured on the back of the moon in ancient times. It was a rabbit in human form, but because it had a pair of rabbit buck teeth, it had a strong sense of inferiority. It usually covered its mouth, only revealing those beautiful ruby-like eyes. It looked like a gentle, refined, and extremely gentlemanly creature, but when it got violent, it wouldn't even recognize its own family. None of those who had seen its buck teeth had survived. Back then, Na Wei had come into contact with SCP-096 a lot in order to study the structure of the ancient divine weapon's teeth. SCP-096 had almost killed him several times by using its buck teeth to bite through his throat. Now that he had released SCP-096 again, Na Wei had to admit that it actually felt a little like he was abusing his position to avenge a personal grudge. "Are you sure you want to release the creatures contained in SCP-096, also known as Material Pack Number 096? "Yes." "Very well, the system understands. After a countdown of 120 seconds, it will be transported to the designated coordinates." In the game hall, Wang Ling emptied the last gold coin bulldozer, and was perfectly satisfied as he used the 200,000 game coins he had just won to exchange for 20,000 gold gear coins. He wasn't an insatiable person, and from the very beginning, he hadn't intended to use up all of the game hall's capital, he just needed to save enough money to buy crispy noodle snacks. "Take care, Lord Jean." With tears in his eyes, the person in charge of the game hall respectfully sent Wang Ling off with his workers at the door. With a wave of his sleeve, he was deeply moved by Wang Ling's leniency, and even welcomed him to come again next time. Wang Ling was very satisfied with this. He felt that this game hall had a lot of future prospects. As one of his ATMs in this world, Wang Ling felt that as long as the Imperial City continued to operate, places like the game hall had to be preserved. Of course, he wouldn't just fleece one place. If the sheep went bald, he wouldn't be able to make any money. The Wang family's teachings had always told him that he couldn't use his abilities to make money in the real world. Wang Ling naturally remembered this family teaching. But the place he was in now was not the real world, but an alternate world. Thus, this couldn't be considered a violation. He was about to go to the snack store that Xiang Yi had opened in this other world to buy crispy noodle snacks. Just as he was less than 500 meters from the entrance of the snack store, there was suddenly an earth-shattering noise. An 8-meter-long and 8-meter-wide cube fell from the sky like a meteor from a strange angle, smashing the snack store into smithereens on the spot. Wang Ling had seen this scene before. Just 7 years ago, it had been the same scene when the gate between worlds had descended. In the end, it had happened just as he was buying snacks. Chapter 1669. When the huge cube with a metallic luster and full of technological feeling appeared on the streets of the downtown area, the spherical guardian immediately issued an abnormal warning. Because there was a difference between the location it was sent to and the actual location it appeared in, this shouldn't have happened. What the hell is going on? Na Wei frowned in displeasure. He had wanted to send the cube precisely in front of Lotus Sun and the others, but he hadn't expected it to be sent directly to the downtown area. Now the situation had become troublesome, and it looked like a lot of people were going to die. Abnormal energy fluctuations of SCP-096 detected. Initial suspicion is that the containment device gave 096 a certain amount of spiritual energy space after leaving the suppression array, allowing it to use its own ability to teleport the entire cube to another location, resulting in a deviation in coordinates. Sure enough, it's become stronger. Na Wei rubbed his chin and sneered. No matter, let's not worry about it for now. Just release another containment creature that doesn't have the ability to teleport in front of Mr. Gong. Release another one. I think SCP-1212 isn't bad, Na Wei said. SCP-1212, Chinese name, Mute. Ability analysis, will launch a sudden attack on all objects that make a sound within its hearing range, using its sharp claws to slit open its stomach. It is a strange humanoid creature with mantis hands and a bloody mouth full of sharp teeth on its head. Just looking at it gives off a strong sense of oppression. All people who come into direct contact with it will involuntarily make sounds of ABA ABA, even the words ABA ABA will constantly appear in their minds, making it impossible for them to think. Whenever someone hears the word ABA 100 times in its vicinity, it will automatically obtain a life and revive immediately after death. According to Na Wei's understanding of SCP-1212, it had accumulated at least 1,260,000 lives over the years. In other words, it would have to be killed at least 1,260,000 times before it would be completely destroyed. Na Wei couldn't wait to see what kind of chemical reaction would occur when this Mr. Gong met 1212. Moreover, there was a certain chance that 1212 would meet 096 this time. In the previous experiments with containment creatures, these two had never met face to face. If they were to fight, it might provide a breakthrough academic contribution to his research on the ultimate version of the neo-archaic mystical weapon. At this moment, the spherical guardian issued another confirmation command. Are you sure you want to liberate the host of SCP-1212, also known as Source Pack 1212? I'm sure. Alright, the system understands. We will be teleported to the designated coordinates in 120 seconds. On the other side, when a huge cube with a metallic luster and a strong sense of technology appeared on the streets of the downtown area, Wang Ling and little girl Nuan, who had been lying on his shoulder all this time, immediately sensed the strange creature inside the cube. At the scene, the debris caused by the collapse of the building splashed in all directions, raising a large amount of dust. At the same time, the terrified voices of passers-by could be heard. Everyone fled, completely unaware of the situation. Hands in his pockets, Wang Ling trembled slightly as he stood in front of the collapsed snack shop. Now, he finally understood what the internet meant by shivering with anger. The flying debris didn't hit Wang Ling, who was protected by a powerful holy light. This was an ability that came with his sage body, which could be activated automatically when he was unconscious and could block all flying spells or props that got close to him. Although Wang Nuan's body was also strong, it wasn't as strong as Wang Ling's. Worried that little girl Nuan would be hurt, he expanded the holy light around him to envelop her as well. The brother and sister pair worked well together. Wang Ling was completely focused on little girl Nuan, who used the power of her shadow Dao to control all the flying debris and prevent it from hurting nearby innocent passers-by. What on earth is going on outside? The snack shop they were in wasn't far from the astrology club. When he saw the huge cube land, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal frowned deeply. Danger. This cube was very dangerous. Although he didn't know what on earth was inside, based on his years of courting death, the creature sealed inside this cube definitely wasn't something from the mundane world. It's a shelter, Xiang Yi said at that moment. He had already unzipped his sniper rifle pouch and was rapidly assembling the 9-yang divine sword, according to my investigation, in order to nurture a top-notch new ancient divine weapon. According to my investigation, the Heartless Patriarch had a habit of capturing strange extraterrestrial creatures back then. Each of these creatures had unique skills, and couldn't be killed so easily using ordinary cultivation methods. Therefore, they can only be imprisoned in this kind of cubic sealing container in this form of seal. Then what on earth are they? It doesn't feel like they're divine beasts born from chaos. Loopy Toad frowned. Ever since it had learned about the existence of that divine marmot back then, Loopy Toad himself had evolved into a divine beast. If the creature in the cube was also a divine beast born from chaos, or had evolved to that level in the later stages, it would definitely resonate with Loopy Toad. But now, this resonance was almost zero. Divine beasts aren't the only creatures born from chaos, there's also a certain chance that alien beasts of chaos will be born. These alien beasts of chaos are also called indescribable creatures. Indescribable creatures? Are these creatures related to the outer gods and the great old ones? Perhaps. That's all I know at the moment. At the very least, there are some indescribable creatures related to the great old ones and the outer gods. As for the others, they're just creatures born from a mixture of great Tao and the power of chaos, said Xiang Yi. I see. Loopy Toad nodded. He more or less understood. That was to say, the unified name for these creatures was indescribable creatures, but they were divided into two factions. One faction was the Great Old Days faction, which was born from the combination of chaos and some of the outer gods and the cells of the Great Old Ones. The other faction was the Great Tao faction, which was born from the combination of the power of the Great Tao and chaos. At that moment, the 9-yang divine sword in his hand had already been completely assembled. He adjusted the 3.2 billion light-year scope on the sword and nodded with satisfaction. To avoid harming the innocent, it's better to kill these alien beasts of chaos as soon as possible. No need. With that person here, this guy shouldn't be able to jump around for long. At that moment, Wang Ming stretched out his hand to stop Xiang Yi from trying to perform a headshot. Xiang Yi, who's here? Wang Ming smiled. Who else could it be? Loopy Toad was alarmed. Could it be Lord F***K? I was wondering why I kept feeling his aura up ahead. It wasn't because I missed him so much that I was hallucinating. Actually, he had wanted to say earlier whether Wang Ling had also come to this alternate world, but he hadn't been very sure. It wasn't until he saw this incomparably familiar scene in front of him that he had the answer in his heart. 7 years ago, he had also crushed a small store, and then by a freak combination of factors, he had turned from a toad into a dog. Who knew what would happen to this rabbit man who had also crushed a small store? At that moment, everyone in Battle Sect in the astrology club was paying close attention to the battle in front of them. They saw Wang Ling slowly walk toward the rabbit that had already escaped the containment container. Loopy Toad rubbed its nose. Why do I smell Anwan's scent on Lord? It was sure that it hadn't smelled wrong. The baby's milk scent was still very obvious. Little girl Nwan is indeed here, on his shoulder, said Wang Ming. So she's Ling Jinren's little sister. She's too small, won't she be in danger? Xiang Yi was a little worried. He knew who Wang Ling was, but didn't know anything about Wang Nwan. In his original world, he and Wang Nwan hadn't interacted at all. Judging from its appearance, this should be the rabbit man from 091. It has an extremely strong self-healing ability, and will kill anyone who sees its buck teeth, Xiang Yi added. As soon as he said that, a scene that no one had expected happened. Suddenly, little girl Nwan shouted, "Rabbit! Bunny!" Then, he jumped off Wang Ling's shoulder and flew toward the rabbit man. Faced with Wang Nuan flying toward it, the rabbit man was also caught off guard. It had been born on the far side of the moon 4 billion years ago, and had never seen such a daring human, and there was actually a baby among them? A look of disbelief and fear appeared in 091's eyes. When Wang Nuan's breath neared him, bringing with it the scent of milk as she rode on his neck, 091's mind was suddenly shaken to a halt. This familiar feeling, at that moment, 091's beautiful ruby-like eyes were filled with tears. Master! 091 let go of the hand that had been covering its buck teeth due to its suicide, and spoke faintly with tears in its eyes. Wang Ling had wanted to kill 091 with a karate chop. In the end, when he saw this scene, he instantly felt relieved. Because 4 billion years ago, he had indeed used the great Dao ability of Shadow Dao in the Heaven's Eye Cliff of the Palm. Thus, the birth of 091 was also related to him. Because he had used Shadow Dao in advance back then. It had caused Wang Nuan's Shadow Dao to react with chaos. And on the far side of the moon, 091 was born. Chapter 1670. When the rabbit codenamed 096 revealed a moved expression with tears in its eyes, Wang Nuan also spoke. The white and soft fur on the rabbit's body climbed all the way up to her shoulders, and she used her small hands to pull 096's ears as if she was pulling on a rein. 096 didn't feel the slightest bit of pain from this tugging, instead, it felt very comfortable. It had waited for 4 billion years to find the value and meaning of its existence. Even if it had never seen Wang Nuan before, its ability to resonate with the master of Shadow Dao wasn't fake. 096 quickly realized that the baby riding on its shoulders and tugging on its ears was the master it had been searching for all this time, and the meaning of its existence in this world. And so, at that very moment, 096, who had never smiled and had always been one-sidedly silent in sorrow, suddenly revealed its buck teeth confidently and smiled like never before. When Xiang Yi saw this scene in the astrology club, he was completely stupefied. That wasn't right. Weren't these hosts supposed to be savage and inhumane monsters? Why were they smiling as if they had seen Ku Xian's birthday? There was clearly something wrong with this scene. It could only be said that as expected of Ling Jinren's little sister, after sharing the same bloodline, there were always things that exceeded common sense. Very quickly, Xiang Yi began to feel at ease, and felt that he had been a little too inexperienced. Grenade-throwing senior immortal, so, this 096 is from the Great Dao School? A creature born of Shadow Dao. Loopy Toad sweated. That seems to be the case. This rabbit's aura is very strong, I didn't expect it to actually be one of us. This result was also beyond Wang Ling's expectations. The seed that had been sown 4 billion years ago had only now been reclaimed. After witnessing all the changes in the world, Wang Ling was actually a little moved when he carefully savored it, and couldn't help but cry at this point. When he saw An Wan playing with the rabbit's ear happily, his heart softened. Although the rabbit had crushed his snack stand and interrupted his plan to buy snacks, An Wan's heart softened. Although this rabbit had crushed his snack stand and disrupted his plan to buy snacks, as long as little girl Nuan liked it, it was the same as picking up a death exemption gold medal. After all, this was his little sister, and his own little sister at that. What could he do? Since his little sister liked it, he could only spoil her. Of course. If one day Wang Nuan lost interest in 096, 096's life would be in danger. Maybe he would be turned into a spicy rabbit head. Wang Ling could see that 096 was very strong. Although it had lived for 4 billion years, the truth was that a considerable part of that time had been spent in the containment facility. In other words, the meat wasn't as old as it looked, and it wouldn't taste bad when cooked. Just as Wang Ling was pondering whether to make 096 into a dish in the future, whether he should braise it, steam it, or make it spicy, 096, which had been exceptionally obedient as An Wan held its 2 rabbit ears, suddenly turned in one direction with an ominous glint in its eyes and a look of extreme hostility. Is there another one? Wang Ling mumbled in his heart. Not far away, a new cubic containment vessel descended along with a deafening roar. 096 was giving out a low warning growl in that direction. At the same time, Nguyen did indeed search the fluffy fur on its head. In an instant, it felt as if its bones had gone limp, causing 096's body to soften. Another one? Loopy Toad said warily in the astrology club. It didn't know if it was an illusion, but it felt that the containment vessel in this cube was more ferocious than 096. From the looks of it, it should be 1212, Xiang Yi said with a frown. Of all the containment vessels that the Heartless Patriarch had captured, 1212 was clearly one of the younger generation, but because of its special abilities, it was also an existence that couldn't be underestimated. Don't panic. With Senior Golden Lamp there, I don't think anything will happen. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was unperturbed. So far, the mastermind behind the scenes of Imperial City hadn't made a move, and instead had released this dangerous containment vessel as the vanguard. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal couldn't help feeling that there was a hidden danger inside. We can't blindly adopt a defensive posture. Are there any brothers willing to go directly to the castle with me to take a look? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said after thinking for a long time. I agree with Senior Immortal. At that moment, Loopy Toad took the initiative to step forward. Then Senior Immortal and this Elder Toad will go to the castle, and Mr. Ming and I will provide long-range support. As Xiang Yi spoke, he stroked the 9-yang divine sword, which had just been assembled. Have you chosen a sniping spot? Wang Ming asked Xiang Yi. No need, just here is fine. But shouldn't a sniper choose the best angle to shoot from? In theory, that's right, but I don't use the 9-yang divine sword. Not only can I see through things, my bullets can also turn. On the other side, at the location of Daika's mansion, along with the landing of a huge cube, a humanoid monster covered in black hair with an indistinct face slowly stepped out of the containment device. It was almost an instinctive reaction, and Odd Jua immediately shielded Kyuya Ryoko behind him. He had wanted to tell Kyuya Ryoko the truth, but hadn't expected danger to descend once again at this critical juncture. Ryoko, I'm sorry. Let's solve the problem in front of us first, okay? I'll tell you everything after that, Odd Jua said. Hearing this, Kyuya Ryoko's expression didn't change, but at least it was a lot more relaxed than before, because Odd Jua instinctively shielded her behind him. In terms of boyfriend power, this was a plus. It was just that because of her hostility toward Qin Zong, Kyuya Ryoko's expression didn't change much. Of course, Qin Zong could also see that Kyuya Ryoko misunderstood him, but this wasn't the time to explain things. Wang Mingdo's voice rang out in Odd Jua and the others' minds almost at the same time as 1212's descent, and they immediately understood what was going on. Looks like it's still coming for me. Lotus Sun sighed. Judging from the information Wang Ming had shared, this containment creature clearly wasn't easy to deal with, and was a very troublesome one. At that moment, 1212's massive body was outlined in a cloud of smoke, and it gave off an unusually dangerous aura. Leave it to me, Ryoko. Odd Jua grit his teeth and walked forward with his gun. Brother Jua, be careful, Qin Zong reminded him from the side. In the end, no one had expected that his warning would cause Kyuya Ryoko to explode. Her mood had just eased a little when Qin Zong provoked her again. She stomped her foot in anger and roared at him, You pervert who likes men. I've put up with you for a long time. Qin Zong, ? As soon as he said that, Kyuya Ryoko rushed forward and tried to slap Qin Zong. Sister-in-law, calm down. Brother Qin isn't like what you think. Zhou Zi reacted quickly in this situation. His peacemaker nature made him instinctively want to step forward to stop her, but Kyuya Ryoko's slap just so happened to land on his back. And then, there was no then. Since the effect of Kyuya Ryoko's blessing hadn't ended, this slap was extremely powerful, and it actually became a huge boost on the spot. There was a loud bang. A firm slap landed on Zhou Zi's back, causing him to instantly transform into an advanced humanoid missile. Then, he turned into a beam of light and shot forward. He shot forward with the indestructible physical strength of his 5-piece long johns, which looked like Michelin tires. He crashed headfirst into 1212 in the smoke. Chapter 1671. The development of things was beyond everyone's expectations, or rather, the effect of Jimiya Ryoko's slap was beyond everyone's expectations. Due to the effect of monk Jin Dang's enlightening technique, Jimiya Ryoko's attributes in all aspects had exceeded her realm. It could be said that she had ascended to a higher level. This slap was a slap blessed by the most holy Buddhist teachings, and it was extremely powerful. It was enough to physically transcend all people under the progenitor realm. However, when this slap hit Zhou Zi, who was wearing 5 layers of long johns, this directly produced a very magical scientific physical reaction. That was, the effect of force was mutual. When this powerful slap fell on Zhou Zi's back, because the effect of force is mutual, the power of the long johns immediately released a backlash power that quickly fell on Jimiya Ryoko's slap. But because the effect of force is mutual, when the backlash power hit the slap, it produced a new backlash power. Then, because the effect of force is mutual, the new backlash power transmitted by Jimiya Ryoko fell on the long johns again, and so on, over and over again. Just a few seconds after Jimiya Ryoko came into contact with Zhou Zi, due to the interaction of force, the backlash power repeatedly jumped back and forth, directly forming an explosive propelling force. At that moment, Zhou Zi appeared out of nowhere, let him turn into light. In an instant, Zhou Zi, who had shot out, hit 1212's abdomen on the spot, pushing forward with a destructive force. At the moment of impact, 1212's soul shook violently. Although his reaction was very fast, almost at the moment when Zhou Zi's head hammered down, he reached out his hand to try to resist Zhou Zi's impact. However, he never thought that a foundation establishment cultivator would have such powerful destructive power. His 2 arms melted on the spot the moment they came into contact with each other. Zhou Zi's entire body was surging with the recoil of the long johns, the crimson recoil force, and the Buddhist holy light produced by the influence of the light consecration spell. These 2 forces did not cancel each other out because of their mutual influence, but instead became stronger and stronger under the influence of each other. The sudden surprise made 1212 lose his left and right arms in an instant. The holy Buddhist light was like 2 bundles of whips, drilling into 1212's body through the wounds the moment his arms collapsed. This kind of destructive and lethal power could no longer be stopped. 1212 gritted his teeth. He did not expect to be targeted as soon as he was revived. His life was definitely not going to be spared. Therefore, he could only think of a way to stop Zhou Zi during the last moments of his life. Damn it, these wretched cultivators must die. As the representative of the great old era faction of the indescribable creatures, at this moment, 1212's hatred for everyone had almost reached its limit. It swore in its heart that it would kill all these human scum in the cruelest way possible. It wanted this group of people to live and suffer the greatest pain. It wanted them to clearly see their stomachs being cut open and their intestines being torn apart bit by bit. Then, it would devour them until nothing was left. In the last moments of its life, 1212 used its own power of hatred to detonate itself, using the huge explosion impact to force Zhou Zi to stop his human missile behavior. As for himself, he had been smashed into pieces. However, 1212 did not die just like that. It had at least 1,200,000 lives. Forget being blown to pieces, even if it was reduced to ashes, it could quickly come back to life. His body finally came to a stop. Zhou Zi rubbed his head. He had no idea what had happened, and only felt that he had moved a very long distance after receiving Jimiya Ryoko's slap. When his body finally came to a stop, he was completely unscathed, except for a little bit of smoke caused by the tremendous air friction. A small team led by Odd Zhua and Lotus Sun quickly arrived. Seeing that 1212 had been turned into cannon fodder by Zhou Zi as soon as it appeared, Odd Zhua grinned from ear to ear. Not bad. Little Wingzi. You did a meritorious deed. Well done. Audiobook had originally brought Zhou Zi to the illusory land of nothingness with the intention of helping Zhou Zi do a meritorious deed, but he hadn't expected his wish to be fulfilled so quickly. On the other hand, Zhou Zi was still in a state of confusion. He had no idea what was going on. Kamiya Ryoko had an apologetic expression on her face. Given her usual temperament, she was never someone who would apologize right away, and would definitely use that roundabout way to express her apologies. But just now, she realized that she had really been wrong. "Z, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you," Kamiya Ryoko said as she bowed. "It's fine, sister-in-law." Zhou Zi rubbed his head and laughed bitterly. "By the way, sister-in-law, what I wanted to say is that there really isn't anything going on between Brother Qin Zong and Audiobook, and Brother Qin Zong has a wife." Zhou Zi had actually learned about this by chance when he had been chatting with Qin Zong not long ago. Hearing this, Kamiya Ryoko instantly blushed and wished she could dig a hole and bury herself in it. Heavens, what had she done? She had actually suspected that Qin Zong was a pervert who liked men. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Thus, Kamiya Ryoko turned around and apologized to Qin Zong. She was really too ashamed. "It's fine, it was just a misunderstanding." Qin Zong gave her his trademark smile. In fact, he wasn't angry at Kamiya Ryoko's misunderstanding at all. On the contrary, he thought this jealous feeling was a little cute. Young girls in love were probably all the same. They always liked to let their imagination run wild, and problems would arise as they thought about it. But now was clearly not the time to let one's imagination run wild. Because 1212 was still alive. And right in front of them, it had already finished reassembling. It was only then that everyone clearly saw what 1212 looked like. It was a strange humanoid creature with praying mantis hands and a bloody mouth filled with sharp teeth. Just looking at it gave people a horrifying feeling. According to the information provided by Mr. Xiaoming, we'll have to kill 1212 1,260,000 times to kill him. "I'm afraid it won't be that easy," Zhou Zi said at that moment. That's not necessarily the case. Most indescribable creatures have the ability to resurrect. But as long as they don't want to resurrect and stop thinking about resurrection, we don't have to kill him 1,260,000 times. Monk Jin Dang smiled and stepped forward. This little monk has a plan. What is it, Senior Jin Dang? Lotus Sun was curious. It's just an idea I just thought of. I just need to make this little benefactor give up on the idea of resurrection. Monk Jin Dang smiled kindly. He felt that the success rate of his idea was extremely high, and perhaps it could make 1212 give up on the idea of resurrection. Damn humans. I'm going to kill you all. By now, 1212 had finished reassembling, and disgusting mucus was coming out of his bloody mouth. But Jin Dang was even faster. He swiftly came up behind 1212 and slapped the ground behind him. In a flash, a solid wall of earth was constructed behind 1212, and Jin Dang even blessed the wall with a light consecration spell. Have you played table tennis before? Monk Jin Dang asked. Everyone, ? At that moment, Monk Jin Dang stepped forward without another word and lightly patted Zhou Zi on the back. Then, Zhou Zi once again turned into a beam of light and shot out. And now, in front of everyone's eyes, a miraculous scene was unfolding. 1212 stood in front of the blessed wall, impressively becoming a human pillar of flesh. Zhou Zi was sent flying by Monk Jin Dang's palm, smashing 1212 to pieces. Before 1212 could finish his cursing, he was stopped. Then, Zhou Zi bounced back from the wall behind 1212, and was sent flying again, smashing the resurrected 1212 to pieces, palm after palm, over and over again, over and over again. It was like a table tennis training session, at the 1600th round. 1212 fell into utter despair and gave up on the idea of resurrection. It was killed as soon as it was resurrected. It no longer wanted to continue this kind of life without any game experience. 1212 left very peacefully. Chapter 1672. In the endless cycle of resurrection and instant death, 1212 finally gave up on the idea of survival and chose to manually delete his account. After Zhou Zi's final wave of attacks scattered 1212, Golden Lamp Monk confirmed that it was impossible for 1212 to come back to life as a pile of minced meat, and then stopped what he was doing. Is it resolved? Zhou Zi stared at the scene in front of him in disbelief. While Golden Lamp Monk had been using him, he had been bounced around non-stop, but to tell the truth, he hadn't felt the slightest bit uncomfortable. On the contrary, he had felt comfortable, as if his whole body had been massaged. This period of time seemed very long, but also very short. By the time he came back to his senses, 1212 was already unable to get up again. Benefactor Zhou's merits are immeasurable. Golden Lamp Monk put his palms together in a Buddhist salute and praised him to his face. Z, it's been hard on you. You deserve the most credit for this. Zhuo was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. Because this way, 1212 would be confirmed to have been killed by Zhou Zi, and no one would be able to step in and steal his head. Zhou Zi, on the other hand, looked ashamed. He rubbed his head, completely at a loss as to what was going on, and could only marvel in his heart at the powerful defensive capabilities of these long johns. Zhuo hadn't lied to him, these long johns were really very strong. Furthermore, they were ridiculously strong. It was just that Zhou Zi felt that something was a little strange. Brother Zhuo made me wear these long johns before he brought me here, saying that they would protect me. Zhou Zi murmured in his heart. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Zhuo's goal wasn't just to keep him safe. Why did it look like he had deliberately arranged for him to pick up the slack? For a moment, Zhou Zi's thoughts were a little disordered. All of this couldn't be said to be impeccable, it was almost all part of Zhuo's plan, which made Zhou Zi feel that Zhuo seemed especially familiar with this aspect. While Zhou Zi was lost in his thoughts, his body suddenly emitted waves of hot steam. It first seeped out from the pores on his body, and then concentrated and gushed out from the top of his head, like a human-shaped chimney. This is... Zhou Zi turned pale with astonishment. After spirit power accumulates to a certain level, it will naturally be released from the top of your head and you've completed your breakthrough. This is a sign that you're about to advance. Congratulations, Zi. Qin Zong understood what had happened at a glance. Zhou Zi was shocked again. I advanced? Yes, if my judgment is correct, he should be at the peak of the late stage of the foundational level. Zhou Zi's mouth was agape, and he looked dumbfounded. What the hell, you can also ascend like this? Seeing that Zhou Zi had successfully advanced just like that, he was even happier. Zi. You're too outstanding. Zhou Zi, all this time, Zhuo had actually been looking for a reasonable successor to the King of Scavengers. Now, it seemed that Zhou Zi did indeed have the ability to inherit his legacy. Not only did he manage to get rid of a troublesome living being on this trip, he even managed to ascend a level. Peak Foundation Establishment Late Stage. At Zhou Zi's age, this realm was enough to be considered a genius. And Zhou Zi's next step was the Jidan stage. Before entering university, there were very few cultivators who could directly break through to the Golden Core stage. This once again proved Zhou Zi's outstanding talent in cultivation. At least in Zhuo's opinion, Zhou Zi was much stronger than he had been back then. On the other side, the expression of Na Wei, who had been sitting upright all this time, changed dramatically the moment 1212's life information completely disappeared. He had never expected that one of the two shelter creatures he had sent out would already be killed in a second. 1212. This was the most brutal of all the newly recruited creatures. Furthermore, it had the ability to resurrect indefinitely. It had actually died, just like that. Na Wei felt that the situation was a little unreal. Where's 096? What's 096 doing? He slapped the table, unable to restrain his anger. The spherical guard then used the surveillance flying insect circling the castle to transmit the scene. At that moment, 096 was being ridden by a baby. Its face was a little flushed, and its snow-white rabbit fur shook as it ran down the street, as happy as a lotus flower. Seeing this scene, Na Wei almost couldn't help but spit out 3 liters of blood. The 2 shelter creatures he had sent out, one had been killed in a second, and the other had become someone's mount. Wasn't this just like one of them giving someone a free kill and experience, and the other giving someone a bunch of equipment? Where did this brat come from? Na Wei felt that Wang Nuan's sudden appearance was even more inconceivable. This was just a baby girl who looked to be less than a year old. How could she have subdued 096 into submission? Go and find out which family this kid belongs to. Sir, there are currently no records of the baby girl's identity in the database. We suspect that she is an unregistered resident. These words dealt a heavy blow to Na Wei's brain. Unregistered resident? A child who had been smuggled in from the slums. Although he couldn't be bothered to look at the slums, the identity census was still in place. Everyone was recorded, so it was unlikely that someone from the slums would sneak in. Then, the only possibility was that someone might have invaded this illusory realm and brought this baby girl in. Although Na Wei felt that this was inconceivable, he couldn't completely rule out this possibility. As his body trembled violently, a boundless hatred followed. Na Wei had wanted to teach Na Wei a lesson, but he didn't expect that he had underestimated the ferocity of this group of people. Although he hadn't completely given up on the ultimate version of the neo-ancient mystical weapon plan, the successive failures finally caused Na Wei to be a little overwhelmed. This was his master and his imperial city. In his territory, he was the one who bullied others. He couldn't be bullied like this. Pass down my order. Increase the intensity. Eliminate all these people. Seeing that the illusory realm might have been invaded by external enemies, Na Wei couldn't just sit back and watch. Therefore, he decided to carry out the following 3 plans. Sir, what do you plan to do? In the core area, release all the sheltered creatures in the SCP-001-010 area. In addition, dispatch the entire army of 10,000 neo-ancient mystical weapons that can be mobilized to search the entire area. At this moment, that person also stood up. In addition, I've decided to do it personally. To ensure that the illusory realm wouldn't be infiltrated by external forces, he had to do this. Shouchung's brain had been harvested. The Wuxin ancestors' pantheon brain, which was made from Shouchung's brain cells, had also been completed. Now, he just needed to merge the pantheon brain with his own brain. He would become this world's. No. Even the most intelligent existence in this universe. Achieving a perfect dimensionality reduction attack. Chapter 1673. It was as if he had slept for a very long time. When Shouchung regained consciousness, he felt that his soul was in an out-of-body state. A rather familiar-looking human brain was immersed in a green spirit fluid, and it was connected to an unknown body through a series of conduits. After a burst of intense mental pain, he felt that his entire soul was floating, as if it had been hooked by something. When he came back to his senses, he was already imprisoned on an electric chair in a pitch-black space. This is the Wisdom Realm. Shouchung, who had once been selected as the most intelligent youth, understood what this place was at a glance. The Wisdom Realm was a special spiritual domain that only great wise people had. It was a place that was tempered by the Naiwan Palace where mental power was gathered. Those who were slightly stronger could temper the Naiwan Palace into other derivative spaces such as memory palaces. And the highest realm was the Wisdom Realm. It was an existence that included all the advanced spaces of the Naiwan Palace. In theory, people with the Wisdom Realm could use the brain waves emitted from their brains to do anything through the power of mental transmission. However, Shouchung never thought that one day his brain would be used to merge and become someone else's appendage. Now, he was imprisoned in the Wisdom Realm. If this situation was explained in a similar academic language in the cultivation world, it was actually a different kind of possession. Possession. At this moment, in the dim and boundless Wisdom Realm, the owner of this body's illusory voice clearly fell into Shouchung's ears. Shouchung, you'd better not make a mistake. I'm just taking back what belongs to me on behalf of Master. Your master? Shouchung frowned. Previously, when his soul was in a free state, he had seen the appearance of the owner of this body with his own eyes. In his limited memory, he didn't seem to have any conflicts with this person. However, to Na Wei, everything seemed to be unimportant. In his eyes, Shouchong was just a tool to revive the god brain. Although the god brain hadn't been completely built yet, it was probably only 70% activated. But Na Wei still felt that with his current mental power, he could become an omnipotent existence. No one would have thought that the brain of the wisest person in the universe, the heartless ancestor, would be inherited by him, the only true disciple in this way. Na Wei sneered. He held a metal cane in his hand and wore a blood-colored cloak as he walked out of the palace step by step. He had no intention of explaining anything to Shouchong. This was because once the Pantheon brain was activated to 100%, it meant that Shouchong's brain would completely fuse with him. At that time, it would only take a snap of a finger to completely destroy Shouchong's personality and retain his own. Completely eliminating the foreign enemies was Na Wei's current top priority. Outside the castle, when the 10 huge cubes were transmitted to different locations in the core area at the same time, the powerful pressure brought by these indescribable creatures immediately radiated to the entire majestic imperial city below. Inside the astrology club, Xiang Yi lay on the ground and used the scope to clearly see the serial numbers of these containment devices. Their containment creatures 0010. Although Xiang Yi had explored the holding area under the castle a few times, he didn't have the time to investigate it thoroughly. Because there were too many creatures, close to 10,000. Most of the sheltered creatures in the 010-010 area were kept in the depths of the area. There was no way to obtain specific information, and the only problem was that they didn't know what kind of strange abilities these creatures had. But using 096 as a standard, the average strength of these sheltered creatures was peak Dao God, and the strongest were Dao ancestors who had just entered the progenitor realm. There's no other way. At that moment, Xiang Yi sighed slightly as he focused his gaze on the scope. Next to him, he and Wang Ming tacitly said in unison, "We can only kill them all." After saying that, Wang Ming and Xiang Yi looked at each other and smiled. Great minds think alike. That was probably it. This is also the first time I've met Mr. Ming. How do you know that I have the ability to kill them all? Xiang Yi smiled bitterly. That's right, it's the first time. But I'm actually very confident in Brother Xiang's strength. Wang Ming also laughed. Also, my little brother was also there. Lord Na Wei in the castle probably didn't expect that he would be jumping around in front of Wang Fa with a single shot. Wang Ming's words made so much sense that Xiang Yi couldn't refute them for a moment. To be honest, he felt that Wang Ming wasn't wrong at all. After all, Wang Ling was here, even if the sky fell down, there would be someone to hold it up. Thinking of this, he looked at his 3.2 billion light-year sighting scope and became abnormally excited. His fair face suddenly became flushed. Are you that happy? Wang Ming smiled. Of course. Xiang Yi said excitedly. Now that I know Ling Jinren is backing me up, I don't need to worry. If I can steal 1 or 2 more heads from Ling Jinren, I can brag about it for the rest of my life. Wang Ming, that was right, except for those who knew Wang Ling well. No one knew how exciting it was to be able to steal a kill from Wang Ling. In fact, Xiang Yi wasn't the only one who had this thought. Just as the 10-cube containment devices appeared in full view of the crowd, before they were unsealed, Odd Shua and Kamiya Ryoko finally explained their relationship with Wang Ling. Kamiya Ryoko was still digesting the massive amount of information. This, you mean, classmate Wang Ling isn't your disciple at all, but, your Shifu? Yes. Odd Shua nodded. Ryoko, I'm very sorry all this time. I didn't mean to lie to you. I actually wanted to say it back then, but I still needed my Shifu's permission first. In that instant, Kamiya Ryoko instantly understood. The truth she had been seeking for so many years also came to an end at that moment. Because according to the timeline, the 10-year-old boy whom the Daycrawler ghost had seen back then should have been Wang Ling. In that instant, all the inexplicable dots connected. Ryoko, Don't blame Senior Ajua. I asked him to keep it a secret back then. After all, the fewer people who know about classmate Wang Ling, the better, Lotus Sun said. Actually, she had already made a plan. If Kumiya Ryoko really couldn't accept Ajua hiding something from her, she would go all out, and use Mysterious Sea's sword chi to manually erase Kumiya Ryoko's memory. Although this would be a little like a pair of beautiful sisters, at least it wouldn't destroy their relationship. In the end, Kumiya Ryoko's reaction was much better than she had imagined. Although it looked like she had taken a long time to digest it, at least she had accepted it. On the other hand, Zhou Zi and Qin Zong on the side did indeed lower their heads after hearing about it, looking thoughtful. Lotus Sun knew that she would have to explain things later. But for now, it was more important to deal with Kumiya Ryoko. Fortunately, Kumiya Ryoko wasn't angry. Instead, like Zhai Yin back then, she was deeply curious about Wang Ling's true strength. Kumiya Ryoko, then, how strong is classmate Wang Ling? Nascent soul? Soul formation? Or? At that moment, Monk Jin Deng suddenly stepped forward and said, Miss Ryoko, do you see those containment devices in the sky? Miss Ryoko, did you feel how strong they are just now? Given Senior Jin Deng's strength, I think he should be able to kill one of them in an instant, said Kumiya Ryoko. Yes. Jin Deng nodded. If this little monk goes all out, he can indeed kill one of them with one palm. But Ling Junren is different. Kumiya Ryoko, what's the difference? Jin Deng, he can kill 100 million with one palm. Kumiya Ryoko. Chapter 1674. As the indescribable creature number 001010 stood in the air, its powerful aura was released at random and swept through the entire area. Their containment devices were destroyed in the air, and that ancient light seemed to extend from time immemorial to the present, giving it an air of eternity. Everyone in the imperial city was shocked by this scene. The nobles trembled and wanted to escape from the core region. However, at this moment, their legs were stiff. Every single one of them was attacked by these cube creatures. The fear that originated from the spirit made every single resident of the imperial city cower and tremble in fear. They were at a loss as to what to do. What the hell is going on? Everything was fine, why did this happen all of a sudden? Is this a natural disaster? What on earth are these cubes? Everyone was stupefied. Even the most powerful dignitaries in Imperial City didn't understand what was going on. In the air, the 10 containment cubes burst out with dazzling light, and as the cubes gradually opened up, a desolate aura hit everyone in the face. For a moment, the residents of Imperial City saw the same illusion. They saw a huge amount of blood spurt out of these cubes like a waterfall, and an extremely murderous aura attacked everything in front of them. Rubbing his eyes, the illusion of a bloody sea of slaughter instantly disappeared, and what followed was a series of explosions that sounded like the rumbling of the Great Tao. 10 humanoid monsters of different shapes and sizes broke out of their cocoons, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. But unlike 1212 and 096, these indescribable creatures looked like they were being controlled as they obediently stood where they were and didn't make any big movements. Wang Ling was calm. Sweeping his king's eye over them, he saw the mental threads that were connected to the heads of these 10 containment creatures. Sure enough, it was as he had thought, someone was manipulating these 10 containment creatures. To be able to manipulate 10 indescribable creatures at the same time, Wang Ling felt that this person was pretty fierce. But fortunately, the current situation was under control. Are they the creatures of the old days? At that moment, Wang Ling stared at all these creatures, his calm gaze seemingly able to see through the ages. A while ago, he had just had a showdown with the grave god, who claimed to have inherited the bloodline of the outer gods of the old days. He hadn't expected to run into him again. He still had that strange eye embryo. Although he couldn't find any connection between it and the king's eye at the moment, he firmly believed that it might be able to think of another way for him to perfectly suppress his power. However, it was clear that this was not the time to experiment. There were too many innocent people in this imperial city. In the end, they still had to move these 10 sheltered creatures to other places. Thus, The moment he opened his king's eye, the three-petaled golden lotus in his eye instantly bloomed. A golden vortex appeared in the sky, gradually expanding from the size of a coin to the size of a vast lake. Then, it swept in all directions, spreading all along the way, giving birth to countless golden vines. What I saw was a city. Down below, the people in the imperial city were dazzled by this miraculous and shocking scene. Above their heads, a vast cluster of buildings appeared. Towering ancient buildings overflowed with light and color, and exuded boundless divinity that filled the entire sky. This was a heavenly city. As high as the sky, this was another ability that Wang Ling had never displayed before. Heavenly King's Eye. This was the heavenly world, created by the King's Eye's enormous power, a supreme space that was above the supreme world, core world, intrinsic spirit field, and all the other big and small worlds created by the power of chaos. Falling into someone else's space meant that the ruler of that space could control you. The ruler was a godlike existence. But the truth was that there was a limit to this. If the other party's spatial ability was greater than that of the ruler of space, they could do the opposite and directly annex the other party's space. Not only could they achieve the reverse polarity, they could even absorb the other party's space for their own use. This meant that as long as Wang Ling wanted to, back when he had been in the grave god's supreme world, he had been able to completely devour it. But that world had been tainted with too much blood. He was worried that his heavenly world would hurt his eyes after devouring the supreme world, so in the end he hadn't done it. This is the city of heavenly worlds. Xiang Yi used his 3.2 billion light-year scope to see everything clearly. He couldn't help but mutter. This was really outrageous. A golden city of heavenly worlds that stretched as far as the eye could see appeared in front of everyone just like that. All the buildings inside glowed with magic light, and every brick and stone was engraved with powerful nomological imprints. It wasn't just one great Tao. The power of all kinds of great Tao crisscrossed on it and then spread out. The indescribable sense of grandeur and magnificence hit everyone's hearts, making them shudder with fear. Everyone in the imperial city was stupefied when they saw this scene. Including Na Wei, who had been leading the team to search the entire city for suspects. They all stood rooted to the spot at that moment. He had clearly fused with the god brain and had activated it to 70% capacity, but he still couldn't stop trembling. This huge city of heavenly worlds gave off an unimaginable sense of oppression. Just by being connected together, it was almost enough to make people feel the urge to kneel down and worship it. Even monk Jin Deng was completely stunned. With one look, he knew that this had to be Wang Ling's doing, so he naturally sighed. The city of heavenly worlds. Ling Zhenren is the only true god in the world. Even Jin Deng sighed with emotion, so it was obvious that Lotus Sun's and Jamiya Ryoko's beautiful faces had turned pale. Apart from them, Zhou Zi and Qin Zong were also naturally shocked. It was only when Odd Zhua had laid his cards on the table with Jamiya Ryoko just now that Zhou Zi had learned that Wang Ling was his Shifu. He had thought it was a joke. It even felt a little unreal. How could Odd Zhua, the grand savior of the cultivation world who had thwarted the sky-swallowing toad back then, be the junior brother of a foundation establishment student? But now, with the appearance of the city of heavenly worlds, Zhou Zi realized that he was too young. Then, he figured it all out. No wonder Odd Zhua was so eager for him to make a contribution in this operation. At first, he had thought that this was Odd Zhua's test for him, but in fact, this was simply his application to become a disciple. If he could become Odd Zhua's disciple and Wang Ling's grand disciple, he would truly be able to soar on the spot. Even if he lost 2 legs over the next decade or so, it wouldn't matter. In the next few years, he might grow faster than anyone else even if he walked backwards. Of course, the person who was most shocked by this scene was, at that moment, it was none other than Qin Zong. He had heard so much about Wang Ling from Gu Xuanji. He had never expected that he would actually fall into Wang Ling's world line. Qin Zong would never have expected it. This was the man who had been placed on his offering table for him to worship all year round. Now, this man was in flesh and blood in front of him. With those familiar dead fish eyes and the faint sound of breathing, He was alive. Chapter 1675. Qin Zong had always admired Wang Ling from the bottom of his heart. He had never seen Wang Ling in person, but had heard a lot of legends about him from Gu Xuanji. Now that he had actually seen Wang Ling in person, his mood was actually very complicated. He was a mix of excitement, disbelief, and the urge to laugh out loud. Perhaps he should have realized long ago that when grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had said the name, Senior Gu, in that tavern called Excellent Era, he should have realized which world line he had fallen into. For Qin Zong, seeing Wang Ling was in fact a powerful tranquilizer, because it meant that he didn't have to worry about not being able to return to his original world at all. After all, the great Ling Zhenren was omnipotent. The god brain had captured these 10 hosts and manipulated them by that smell, but the reality was that no matter how much that smell tried to control them with its mental strength, it couldn't manipulate their bodies in the slightest. From 001 to 010, these 10 indescribably powerful beings hovered in the vast and boundless sky. The moment the epic golden all-heavens city appeared, it was as if they had been petrified and were completely motionless. The all-heavens world was destroyed. In the face of this overwhelming power, no creature was strong enough to contend with Wang Ling. Countless golden vines hung down from the golden all-heavens city and aimed at these host creatures. In an instant, they were all tied up at an incredibly slow but also incredibly fast speed, and then dragged into the all-heavens world. When Wang Ling opened his eyes again, the world in the sky had already been turned upside down. He was standing on a golden city, and every brick under his feet was transformed from the supreme great Tao. In front of him were 10 hosts who looked like they had only just reacted. In just a split second, Wang Ling withdrew his power of sight. In that instant, these 10 powerful hosts were sucked into the all-heavens world of the King's Eye. Roar! Number 001 hammered the ground and let out a strange cry. He had 6 iron arms, and the moment his small mountain-like fist touched the ground of the all-heavens world, the power of the great Tao in the ground backlashed him, and he rolled on the ground as if he had been electrocuted. Wang Ling hadn't made a move, and hadn't even used the divine power of the heavenly worlds to crush it, but because of this simple hammer blow, the creature inside number 001 was already on the verge of death. However, the miserable state of number 001 did not strike fear into the rest of the host creatures. Most of these indescribable creatures had the ability to heal themselves, so they generally ignored the injuries on their bodies. On the contrary, when they saw that number 001 was injured, they all turned around and began to dismember him inhumanely. In just a moment, number 001 was reduced to a pile of bones. Then, the other 9 hosts suddenly became even more powerful. From their auras to their bodies, they all received a brand new boost. In fact, Wang Ling had never thought that the shelter creatures would have this trick up their sleeves. They would actually be so brutal as to devour their companions in order to activate their new power. But this power was still not enough for Wang Ling. No matter how much these creatures devoured and grew, they couldn't change the current situation. He stretched out his index finger and pointed to 002 in front of him. Boom! There, the golden light rushed into the sky, and number 002 exploded on the spot, breaking into pieces. Then, the chunks of flesh that had been blown away in all directions turned into strips of flesh that resembled worms, and regrouped in all directions. They weren't affected by the heavy injury effect? Wang Ling was slightly astonished. Because of what had happened in the past. The creatures he had beaten up had almost no chance of reforming or healing. But perhaps because of their different physiques, these creatures weren't affected by the heavy injury effect at all. Thus, Wang Ling, who had felt that the battle was a little boring, became a little more spirited. This meant that he could try out some other spells that he had never used before. Normally, he wouldn't have had the chance to experiment at all. On the other side, as Wang Ling and the 10 great hosts entered the heavenly worlds, that overwhelming sense of oppression in the imperial city also dissipated. Na Wei didn't know what had happened, but when Wang Ling left, he suddenly felt that he could do it again. Listen to my command, clean up immediately. Using the god brain to connect to the will of tens of thousands of new ancient divine weapons, he began to manipulate them in square formations, and immediately locked onto a target to focus fire on. That target was Wang Nuan, who was writing 096 everywhere. He was sure that this foreign baby girl definitely had connections with other outsiders, so he decided to attack her. This way, he might be able to attract other outsiders. In any case, she was just a baby. Even though she seemed to be playing along well with 096, for some reason, 096 was willing to be her mount and hadn't attacked her. But 096 was just a host in the end. How could it be a match for his 30,000 perfect new ancient divine weapons? After Na Wei gave the order, the square formation of new ancient divine weapons closest to Wang Nuan swiftly surrounded her along the street. There were more than 100 Dao God-level new ancient divine weapons. This made 096 feel a little nervous. Wang Nuan pulled 096's rabbit ears, her expression as calm as an ancient well. Xiang Yi, on the other hand, was extremely worried as he looked through his high-powered scope. "Mr. Ming, this girl is surrounded, don't worry, it's fine." Wang Ming's face was calm. Sure enough, not long after Wang Ming said this, a familiar emerald green light shone from Wang Nuan's body. Because of the huge difference in numbers, the Sword Spirit's Savior contract was triggered again. Thus, Leng Ming had been summoned here from the Sword King world. Although it had only been a few days since their last battle, Leng Ming's battle strength had changed completely every time he appeared on the battlefield. He had grown even more. "His Excellency the Lord of the City wants us to arrest her. If you don't want to die, get out of the way." The leader of the new ancient divine weapons was blonde. These people's appearances and hairstyles had all been automatically created using big data, and each of them looked different. "That's strange. I'll return those words to you," Leng Ming said as he stood in front of Wang Nuan and hovered slightly in the air. His nimble training clothes fluttered even though there was no wind, showing off his divinity. This team of new ancient divine weapons was stunned, which then turned into anger. The auras of more than 100 Dao gods overlapped and bombarded Leng Ming in an attempt to teach him a lesson. But Leng Ming didn't even take half a step back. "I've already warned you. Don't blame me for attacking." Leng Ming snorted softly. He opened his small palm, and an emerald green blade of grass appeared in it. "Little friend, are you going to kill someone with this blade of grass?" The blonde man and the troops behind him instantly laughed. Leng Ming didn't say anything else. Boom! He threw out the blade of grass and cut through the street. His movements were unbelievably fast, and the blade of grass instantly split the street in two, creating a bottomless abyss. Countless new ancient divine weapons couldn't react in time and fell into the abyss on the spot. Then, the crack in the abyss swiftly closed at a speed that the naked eye could see, and the street was quiet once more. Because in that moment, Leng Ming remembered what Jinka had taught him. Jinka had said to him, "Destroying the environment is not right," so Leng Ming felt that it was fine as long as you destroyed it and then repaired it. This way, it wouldn't be considered going against Shifu's wishes. Chapter 1676. No one would have thought that the power of a blade of grass could be so terrifying. It was only a few inches long, but the moment it pierced through, it exuded an unparalleled divinity, and its light was so bright that it could illuminate eternity. Bringing with it a terrifying sword intent that seemed to have pierced through the ages, it instantly split the ground beneath its feet into two and opened up a chaotic abyss, burying all these Dao deity-level neo-ancient divine weapons in the chaos of the abyss. Then, the cracks in the ground closed up, and a long row of grass sprouted from where the sword intent had just been released. In the blink of an eye, 1/10 of the 30,000 Dao God-level neo-ancient divine weapons had been killed on the spot by Leng Ming's blade of grass. This was a huge deterrent. If it wasn't for the fact that there were innocent people on the streets, Leng Ming felt that he could have made a bigger ruckus, and maybe he could have directly wiped out the scene on his own. It was just a Dao god. Given his current abilities, it was as easy as chopping vegetables for him to cut down Dao gods with his sword. This was the result of Jinka and Bai Qiao's daily and nightly special training. Furthermore, there was another advantage to helping Leng Ming. and that was that they could learn from each other. It wasn't just Leng Ming who had improved, even Jinka and Bai Qiao had become stronger than before. This meant that once Jinka and Bai Qiao fused into Jingbai again, Jingbai would be much stronger than before. In the blink of an eye, he had lost 3,000 neo-ancient divine weapons. After these mental links were severed from the god brain, Na Wei's god brain also fell into a brief standstill. In that instant, a large number of the nerves in his brain that were connected to the neo-ancient divine weapons were severed like fragile noodles. At the same time, pain from the mental backlash followed, but it didn't last too long, and Na Wei quickly came back to his senses. When he did, anger immediately welled up in his brain. He flew into a rage, and with a stomp of his feet, he soared into the sky. In an instant, all the ancient divine weapons moved at the same time, and they transformed into wisps of flowing light that converged from all directions. They actually wrapped around his torso, limbs, and head and started fusing together. At that moment, the most powerful auras continuously overlapped and converged on Na Wei's body. When a total of 27,000 ancient divine armaments with Tao God energy assembled in the air, a 60-meter-tall ancient god giant appeared before everyone. With the blue sky above his head and the earth beneath his feet, just a wave of his arm could bring forth boundless might. An astonishing amount of energy was being released, instantly engulfing the entire illusory realm of nothingness. This was an automatic search through the Pantheon brain. Since Na Wei had all the information of the natives, it only needed to go through a process of elimination to find the ants that had infiltrated this world. I will kill all of you. With Na Wei's god brain as its core, the ancient god giant put its mountainous wide palms together and formed a seal, sucking grenade-throwing senior immortal, Lupi Toad, Xiang Yi, Qin Zong, Qumi Ryoko, and the others into its supreme world. This supreme world that was built within the huge stone array was filled with large pieces of irregularly shaped stones. They were piled up together and covered densely with obscure chaos runes. Just looking at them with the naked eye would cause one to feel dizzy. Why are we suddenly here? Grenade-throwing senior immortal and Lupi Toad were astonished. They had initially moved together with the intention of directly destroying the nest that housed the creatures, but hadn't expected Na Wei to bring them to the supreme world not long after they had gone in. Oh no! Mr. Ming is still outside. Xiang Yi was extremely nervous, Nine-Yang divine sword in hand. Ah! At that moment, An Wan, who was lying on Leng Ming's back, cried out softly. What did spiritual master Wan say? Xiang Yi was bewildered. This was infant language, and other people couldn't understand it, but as a sword spirit, Leng Ming naturally understood. Thus, Leng Ming translated, An Wan said that she has already sent 096 to protect Mr. Ming, so there's no need to worry about him. Hearing this, Xiang Yi swallowed. He could only say that as expected of a big shot, he had actually predicted in advance that he would be sucked into the supreme world, and had contacted 096 on the spot to protect Wang Ming. At that moment, Xiang Yi just wanted to say to himself that he was still too young. Sure enough, whether it was Ling Jinren or his sister, they were the standard monsters, and monsters couldn't be measured by normal cultivator logic. At that moment in the supreme world, Na Wei had thought that doing this would increase his deterrence. However, it didn't seem to be the case. These people were clearly outsiders, and they were even sucked into his supreme world. But what Na Wei found very strange was that these people didn't seem to be afraid at all. Not only were they not afraid, they were even chatting. I never thought this guy would have this trick up his sleeve. He can actually absorb and combine these new ancient divine weapons for his own use. If he's really able to mass-produce all the new ancient divine weapons in the entire illusory world, I'm afraid his strength will be even more terrifying, Ajua said with a frown. Then what should we do next? If we can't defeat this big guy, I'm afraid we won't be able to break free from this supreme world, right? Lotus Sun asked. She was very relaxed and content with the mysterious sea in her hand, itching to try. After all, she had just laid her cards on the table with Jamiya Ryoko, which meant that she no longer needed to be afraid. This humble monk suggests that Miss Rong should attack later. This humble monk, little friend Xiang Yi, little friend Qin Zong, little friend Leng Ming and spiritual master Nuan will take the lead. Then, senior immortal, little friend Loopy Toad, Mr. Zhua and little friend Z will take the second round. Finally, Miss Rong and Miss Jamiya will wrap things up. Lotus Sun and Jamiya Ryoko, this plan indeed sounded flawless and safe. But why did it sound like they were picking up scraps? What was even more horrifying was that Zhou Zi could actually fight the second round. But when she thought of how Zhou Zi had been bounced around the field like a ping-pong ball, she instantly felt relieved. Then let's do as Senior Golden Lamp says. At that moment, Qin Zong couldn't help laughing. This ancient god giant is using some kind of method to reassemble its power. While this supreme world is indeed a genuine supreme world, it's also flashy without substance. If it can be defeated, the supreme world's power will be weakened little by little. Senior Golden Lamp's skill is very good. Monk Golden Lamp waved his hand and hurriedly stretched out his palm. Golden light overflowed in his palm, and the golden light of Virokana coalesced in his hand. Then, everyone, according to the plan, this humble monk will snipe the head in the first round. Xiang Yi quickly climbed down and started to adjust his 9-yang divine sword. Then, I'll focus on the left and right arms. Qin Zong nodded. That's good, then the left and right legs are mine. Wang Nuan, ah. Ah ah ah. Xiang Yi and Qin Zong, question mark. Leng Ming, Nuan said she'll attack the middle. At that moment, all the men on the field couldn't help tensing up, only the smell made their scalps numb. This group of people, in his supreme world, they were actually discussing how to attack him so calmly. They simply didn't give him any face. They didn't care about martial ethics at all. Chapter 1677. In the illusory world of nothingness, everyone from Battle's sect had been moved away by the god brain, except for 3 people. The first was Wang Ming. Because he was currently borrowing Jia Bugui's body, he hadn't been recognized by the god brain. The remaining 2 were Li Xian and Zhang Zaidan. Na Wei had acted too quickly just now. It was almost a second before he had sent out his brainwaves to pull everyone from Battle's sect into the supreme world, and Wang Ming had already guessed what the other party was going to do. After all, Na Wei had already activated the god brain, and Wang Ming's current state was nothing more than a branch of his own brainwaves, so it was probably impossible for him to match them. Thus, at this critical moment, Wang Ming swiftly spread out his brainwaves and chose Li Xian and Zhang Zaidan. Using his insignificant strength in comparison to that smell, he used his brainwaves to form a shield so that the 2 of them couldn't be identified for a short period of time. This concealment layer was more troublesome than he had imagined, and it took Wang Ming less than 30 seconds to cast it. Although he had succeeded in tricking the smell, his head was extremely hot and steaming with smoke. Fortunately, he had been prepared. Before Monk Jin Dang and the others had been sucked into the supreme world, Wang Ming had already asked Monk Jin Dang to leave behind a few talismans to lower the temperature, which would just about last them through this period. As expected of Ling Zhenren's brother. Very quickly, Li Xian and Zhang Zaidan appeared in front of Wang Ming almost instantly. They were the first to enter the illusory world, and currently had the most information. Now that the battle in the high world was in full swing, Na Wei thought that he had already drawn all the outsiders into the high world, leaving the entire illusory nothingness defenseless. In Wang Ming's eyes, this was an excellent opportunity. Greetings, seniors. Wang Ming bowed. His body was a little weak, and he didn't look like he was in a good condition. Just as Wang Ming was about to fall, Li Xian stepped forward to support him. After sensing Wang Ming's condition, he was extremely amazed. You're just an ordinary person, but you're actually able to do this. He couldn't imagine that an ordinary person who wasn't even a cultivator could actually use the human brain to such an extreme. Furthermore, he was only using a branch of his brainwaves to form a shield to resist Na Wei's 70% god brain. This situation made both Li Xian and Zhang Ziba extremely astonished. He didn't know if the divine brain had shrunk or if Wang Ming was really too strong. I'm sorry, senior. I'm fine. In the end, These brain waves won't last long, but it's already a great fortune to be able to keep the two seniors here, Wang Ming said at that moment. In fact, he had carefully considered leaving Li Xian and Zhang Zijin behind at the critical moment. Furthermore, the moment the shield formed, Wang Ming used his power to simultaneously collect the intelligence that the two of them had collected so far. Of course, Li Xian and Zhang Zizi knew who Wang Ming was and didn't put up any resistance, otherwise, it wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Right now, the most dangerous things in this imperial city are the creatures that have been taken in. The reason why I left the two of you here is mainly so that the two of you can deal with these fellows. Wang Ming said. Both seniors came from the corpse wrapping picture. Their current bodies were created by the King's Eye illusion, and they were reconstructed using the technique of the coexistence of illusion and reality. It looks like it's made of flesh and blood, but it's actually just an illusion. That's right. Zhang Zi nodded and said, in our current state, we are indeed just two dead people. Therefore, we don't have to be afraid of those shelter creatures. He more or less understood Wang Ming's meaning. In fact, there was no one more suitable than him and Li Xian to deal with those troublesome hosts. That was because the majority of the hosts had the ability to resurrect, and the slightest carelessness could cause them to suffer under their strange abilities. If they were to use regular troops to deal with them, they would probably suffer greatly. But he and Li Xian were different. Since he was already a dead man, he did not mind dying a few more times, thanks to the eye power of the King's Eye. No matter how serious his and Li Xian's injuries looked, they would automatically recover. It could be said to be the advanced version of the impure earth reincarnation. But even so, Li Xian and Zhang Zidi weren't very confident in dealing with the hosts. They were the first to sneak in, and when they learned that grenade-throwing Senior Immortal and Loopy Toad were also going to sneak under the castle, they planned to meet up with them to find a solution to the shelter's problem. Unfortunately, before they could meet, the man and the dog were sucked into the Supreme World. I know your concerns, seniors, so I've already thought about it. Perhaps this thing can help the two seniors. At that moment, Wang Ming's lips curled into a meaningful smile, and he took out something that looked like a scroll from his pocket. Seeing this, Li Xian and Zhang Zidi's eyes almost instantly widened. That's right, this is the small corpse wrapping painting, Wang Ming replied. Small corpse wrapping painting? Li Xian and Zhang Zidi were extremely astonished. How could there be such a thing? They knew about the eternal corpse wrapping painting, but they had never heard that it actually had a branch. I had Ling Ling's Wang Ming draw this. After he finished drawing it, it directly teleported into his hands, Wang Ming said. Wang Ming said, like the immemorial corpse wrapping painting, this is also a powerful sealing magic artifact, and it's specially made for shelter creatures. It's an independent space inside, separate from the eternal corpse wrapping painting. Seniors, if you use this magic artifact, I believe you'll definitely succeed. This was actually drawn by Ling Zhenren. Li Xian felt that Wang Ling had once again done something beyond his understanding. When did you draw it? This eternal chaotic weapon wasn't like it could lay eggs, how could it come and go as it pleased? Very quickly, before he opened the King's Eye's world of heavens, he casually drew one. It's a bit casual, but it's enough to deal with that bunch of hosts. When you use it, you just need to wander around the underground space with this small corpse wrapping painting, Wang Ming said. All the hosts who try to attack you will be suppressed by this small corpse wrapping painting, and then taken into the world inside the painting. At the same time, the battle on the other side of the Supreme World was still going on. In the face of such a massive ancient god giant in the enemy camp's Supreme World, it would be unrealistic to say that they weren't moved at all. It could only be said that Zhan Zong and the others had found a sense of balance in this situation when they had enough teammates. Monk Jin Dang, who had made the first move, had a pensive look on his face. Back in ancient times, he had respected his old friend Heartless Patriarch immensely. He hadn't expected to meet him again under these circumstances. Although the person he was meeting was Heartless Patriarch's successor, his disciple Na Wei. But the fluctuations given off by the god brain weren't fake. At that moment, he was the first to attack, and his first move was a Virokana golden light palm. The palm, which blotted out the sky and the sun, fell from the sky and pressed down. Every line on the palm could be clearly seen, which released golden light as the energy of the Vairocana golden light palm poured into the ancient god giant's head to burn. The sky of the supreme world turned fiery red, and it was shockingly a scene of the end of the world after a long night. Chapter 1678. It's our turn. Xiang Yi sprawled on the ground and growled. He couldn't resist the sight of such a coordinated battle. As a qualified sniper, the most important thing to do was to stay calm. However, at this time, when everyone was working together to face such a terrifying ancient god giant, everyone could not help but feel excited. They could not help but feel a surge of blood boiling in their bodies. His 9-yang divine sword was finally put to use after hiding in the illusory realm for a long time. At this time, Xiang Yi took a deep breath and focused all his attention on the high-powered scope 3. 2 billion light-years away. This was a sniping distance of 10,000 years. There was no need to consider the angle of the sniping. As long as he locked his aura on the left and right arms of the ancient god giant, he could automatically lock onto the enemy. It could be said that he could hit wherever he pointed. At the same time, in this short moment of aiming, everyone could feel that the gigantic 9-yang divine sword sniper rifle was emitting a dazzling silver light. This was the materialization of spiritual energy. So that's how it is. Through the blessing of one's own cultivation, the bullet's power is superimposed. Jin Deng said with slight surprise. This 9-yang divine sword did not have a magazine. All the bullets were condensed by Xiang Yi through his own cultivation. In other words, Xiang Yi could control the strength of the bullets. Of course, the most important thing was, since the bullets had the ability to be retrieved, they could automatically return to Xiang Yi's side even if they were shot out. There was no waste of cultivation at all. This was the so-called perpetual movement of one's cultivation. However, Xiang Yi looked very young, so monk Jin Deng thought that the cultivation in the bullet might not be much. However, in the next moment, the slap in the face came without warning. Boom! Boom! It was clearly a sniper rifle, but when the muzzle of the gun was fired, it produced a sound like a cannonball. Senior Xiang is so strong. Lotus Sun didn't know how Xiang Yi had done it. But the 2 silver bullets carried Xiang Yi's 2,000 years of cultivation. Just like that, they turned into 2 straight beams of light and attacked the ancient god giant's right arm. A bullet with 2,000 years of cultivation. 2 bullets are equivalent to 4,000 years of cultivation. This shouldn't be your full power, right? Qin Zong's expression was also very surprised. Because Xiang Yi looked even younger than him, and did not seem to have this level of cultivation. If Xiang Yi could reach this level of cultivation at such a young age, Qin Zong could only think of one possibility, and that was that Xiang Yi might have entered a place similar to the time realm. It was a free mystic realm that drifted in the universe. Under normal circumstances, it was very difficult to find the entrance. However, because the time flow was very slow, a year in there would only be a day in the outside world. He thought that Xiang Yi's cultivation came from there. But that was not the case at all. I see. Other than going to the realm of time, you can also borrow the heavens. Borrow the sky. This explanation stunned everyone in the surroundings. It was the first time most of them had heard of such an explanation. To put it simply, the stronger you meet, the stronger you become, Monk Golden Lamp said. Borrow the heavens was not an ability that everyone possessed. Monk Golden Lamp could see that Xiang Yi was a man with a story, and to be able to obtain such an ability, he was indeed extraordinary. This ability to become stronger with the strong might be useless on other people, but it didn't hurt on Xiang Yi. Because borrowing the heavens was borrowing someone else's heavens. He could borrow anyone's heavens, convert it into cultivation, condense it on the bullet, and shoot it out. In other words, the 2 bullets with 2,000 years of cultivation and a total of 4,000 years of cultivation might not have come from Xiang Yi. The total cultivation of everyone here was more than tens of thousands of years. Xiang Yi could withdraw it according to the situation. Bang! Bang! Just as everyone was thinking, two silver bullets quickly hit the left and right arms of the ancient god giant. It was obvious that Na Wei wanted to reach out to block, but Xiang Yi's bullets began to turn the moment they got close. From a strange angle, they made an arc and hit the ancient god giant's arms from behind. For a moment, two huge mushroom clouds were blown up by the silver bullets, blowing two huge holes in the arms. A bunch of trash. How dare you compete with me? However, on the other side, Na Wei made a disdainful sound. Although his arms had holes in them, they were rapidly recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The ancient god giant's self-healing ability was extremely fast. With the power of 27,000 new mystical weapons, his self-healing speed was also 27,000 times faster than before. Just blowing up his body wouldn't affect him at all. In reality, these two bullets were just Xiang Yi's trial design. Boom! At this moment, suddenly, a silver bullet with 8,000 years of cultivation shot out from the Nine-Yang Divine Sword Sniper Rifle. With a destructive force, it shot forward with destructive lethality. With a huge roar, countless space cracks formed as the bullet passed. Wherever the silver bullet passed, it was like an aurora that broke through the sky, as if it had the power to kill gods. With a horrifying aura. It was just a single bullet, but it turned into an aurora as it flew past the ground, splitting the land in front of it into two. The powerful shockwave tore it apart, splitting it into two. Countless broken rocks floated up as the space was broken. Once it hit, it could destroy the sun, moon, and stars in the sky. Xiang Yi's lips curved slightly. From a long distance, he could already feel Na Wei's fear of his silver bullet. He began to raise a huge gray-gold barrier in an attempt to block the silver bullet's advance. However, the silver bullet was too powerful. The 8,000 years of cultivation bullet had the power to penetrate armor. Almost the instant it touched the barrier, cracks appeared on its surface. He was clearly in Na Wei's supreme world, but he was in a passive situation. This made Na Wei extremely unhappy. Blindly defending wasn't going to work. But blocking this 8,000 years of cultivation bullet was already too much for him to split his attention. In the next second, his real body emerged from between the ancient god giant's eyebrows. But only half of his body emerged. His brain was connected to countless tubes, and his body was covered in many disgusting things. A pale white beam of light gathered in his mouth. It's ancient divine jade. A cannon shot condensed from cultivation. Qin Zong said. Ancient divine jade? I thought it was tail beast jade, but then again, isn't this cultivation different from Senior Xiang Yi's bullet? It can't be recycled. Miss Rong, you're wrong. In essence, there's no difference. The golden lamp explained, this is his supreme world, and the cannon that condensed his own cultivation will eventually be consumed in his supreme world. This is another kind of cycle. I see. Lotus Sun nodded. She was about to step forward and open the barrier of the mysterious sea, when Qin Zong stepped forward and stood in front of everyone. Lotus Sun, Senior Qin. You. At this moment, he crossed his arms confidently. Finally, he revealed his arrogant face. Miss Rong, don't waste your energy. I'm enough. Don't worry, even if I stand here and let him shoot, he'll miss. Chapter 1679. A speck of black light condensed in the middle of the white ancient god jade cannon carried the powerful power of primal chaos, which shook the nearby space and shattered it like a glass plate. This power could not be said to be not shocking, and it was so terrifying that it made one unable to breathe or speak. Senior Qin, are you really not going to use a barrier? Lotus Sun still had some misgivings about this. If this cannon hit them, given everyone's battle strength, it might not directly kill them, but it would still hurt a lot. Lotus Sun had originally wanted to use Mysterious Sea's Sword Chi barrier and Monk Jin Dang's illumination spell to strengthen the barrier. It would consume a lot of spirit power, but it might be able to withstand this blow. But now that Qin Zong was directly in front of everyone, she was at a loss. Brother Qin, can you do it? Eyes wide, Xiang Yi lay prone on the ground and averted his gaze from the scope with a doubtful expression. He actually didn't know much about Qin Zong's background, and had only heard on the way just now that Qin Zong considered himself to be the only koi in the cultivation world. Koi. There were too many lucky people in this world, and Xiang Yi felt that his luck was pretty good, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to build that wasteland cultivation world into such a spectacular place. Almost everyone who was young and accomplished in cultivation had more or less a bit of luck. Luck was something that couldn't be explained clearly, and it couldn't be seen physically. In Xiang Yi's view, relying on one's luck alone wasn't very useful. Boom! At that moment, the extremely white beam of light from the ancient god Jade cannon exploded in the air like a heavenly drum. Wherever the destructive beam of light passed, everything collapsed and shattered. The earth overturned and was cut into pieces, and endless cracks spread out, blurring the scene. Countless boulders in the supreme world were smashed by the beam of light, turning into a large amount of gravel and sand that danced wildly in the sky. Qin Zong stood alone in front of everyone with his arms crossed. Jin Dang, Xiang Yi, Leng Ming, Lotus Sun, Zhua, and the others all frowned because they really believed Qin Zong's nonsense and didn't take up any defensive positions at all. God knew what would happen if such a fierce and destructive blow hit them. Qin Zong, however, stood unhurriedly in front, holding the fort. At that moment, everyone saw a seven-colored stream of air rising from his body, which shone with a mystical light. Could this be? Everyone was stunned and couldn't believe what they were seeing. This is the essence of luck. Is there really someone who can turn such an illusory thing into a substance? Even the golden lamp monk found it incredible. He saw that the condensed luck condensed into a huge seven-colored koi behind Qin Zong. With a flick of its tail, it instantly whipped the violent white aurora away. It actually used its own luck to change the trajectory of the aurora by a certain angle. Then, the aurora of the ancient god Jade struck the barrier of the supreme world. This barrier was originally set up by Na Wei himself to prevent Lotus Sun, Jin Dang, and the others from escaping. Unexpectedly, when the pure white ancient god Jade light beam rushed up, it was reflected back by the barrier. Killing two birds with one stone, it passed through the barrier from a strange angle and broke the two legs of the ancient god giant. With a roar of pain, his huge body fell down uncontrollably, raising a lot of dust. At the same time, Xiang Yi's bullet with 8,000 years of cultivation also hit its target. In just a short moment, under Qin Zong's terrifying luck, the limbs of the ancient god giant suffered a devastating blow. Wow! At the same time, Wang Yuan couldn't help but want to make a move. She rode on Leng Ming's neck and began to wave her little childish fists, looking like she was going to beat up the ancient god giant. Wang Yuan was about to make a move, but Jin Dang and the others didn't. They gave Yuan enough opportunity to show off, and they stood and watched from a distance. Leng Ming used his sword energy to firmly attach Wang Yuan to his shoulder, trying to make her use him as a chair in a comfortable position. The total age of the two of them added up was less than 10 years old. They were just two children, and one of them was even an infant. They didn't seem to have much lethality and destructive power. The moment their chubby little fists swung out, it seemed to bring about a kind of full confusion to people. It didn't look like they were going to hurt much. However, when Leng Ming and Wang Yuan got closer, the ancient god giant, whose limbs were still recovering, let out a shrill scream. Ow! Two huge shadow arms stretched out from the ground. They were the ancient god giant's own shadow. Manipulating the two shadow arms, little girl Yuan tore at the ancient god giant's two legs, which were still recovering, as if she was tearing chickens with her bare hands. Unexpectedly, she really did try to attack his middle, as she had said at the beginning. That scream rang out again and again. It was the ancient god giant who was injured, not him. However, the ancient god giant's nerve pain sensation was connected to his god brain. Furthermore, as a man, the most unbearable pain he could endure was being hit in the middle. The group was petrified. Little girl Yuan's ferocity was beyond their imagination. She was just a little girl who had just been born, but she was actually able to tear the ancient god giant apart with her little body, which was the size of a grain of sand. Is this what it means to learn from others in order to subdue them? She's actually using the giant's shadow to attack the giant. As expected of the master of Shadow Dao, Loopy Toad exclaimed in admiration. But they were well aware that this wasn't all of little girl Nguyen's strength. Damn thing, I'm going to tear you to pieces. Inside, the ancient god giant, Na Wei, who was controlling the giant, was enraged by the intense pain. In the blink of an eye, he had actually used a gecko's tail technique, completely abandoning his lower body that was being torn apart and separating his upper body from his body. Then, Wang Nguyen's left and right legs, which had been separated like chicken drumsticks, turned into a large amount of black sand, which broke down and then gathered back on his lower body with unimaginable agility. Clang! At that moment, Na Wei, who was using form displacement transposition, manipulated the ancient god giant to attack again. A golden spear appeared in his hand, which was more than 100 zhang tall and even taller than him. Holding it in one arm, he swung it with all his might. The spear pierced the air and emitted a great deal of light as it ruthlessly stabbed toward Wang Nguyen. That's not right. Why does it feel like his aura hasn't weakened at all after being abused? Grenade-throwing senior immortal sensed something strange. It's because the god brain has become stronger again. His god brain wasn't fully activated before. At that moment, Monk Jin Deng said, if his god brain is really activated to the same level as the heartless ancestor back then, apart from spiritual master Nguyen, no one here will be his match. Chapter 1680. As for how ferocious an eternal level expert was, only those who had come from that era would know. Monks had 4,000 reincarnations, but their cultivation was far more than that. If they lived for 100 years in each reincarnation, they would have 40,000 years of cultivation, which could be said to be 40,000 years of true cultivation. However, only the Golden Lamp monk himself knew the specifics of how much cultivation he had. Even though Li Xian and Zhang Ziqin had been beaten by Wang Ling, that was because their opponent was Wang Ling. In fact, in the Supreme Winding Up Corpse painting, any eternal level expert couldn't be underestimated. Take the Heartless Patriarch, for example. Since he had the ability to escape Dao ancestor Wang's restraints and slip away under his nose, his strength was naturally unparalleled. As the battle went on, Na Wei and the ancient god giant controlled by the god brain became stronger and stronger as the god brain's activation increased. As their enemies, Battle Sect and the others naturally couldn't underestimate them. At the very next second, the ancient god giant's body underwent another transformation. As the eyes on his head shone with a brilliant light, streaks of blood marks appeared all over his body. A ferocious and domineering aura filled the entire supreme world. This aura was so shocking that it turned into waves of air that swept across thousands of miles. Then, fresh nerves and blood vessels condensed from these blood patterns, causing his body to expand once again. In a flash, the ancient god giant's muscles swelled and his bones elongated to a height of 100 feet. His body was more than twice as sturdy as before, and black armor began to condense all over his body. Pangu Overlord Body Protection. Jin Deng frowned slightly. Things looked a little troublesome now. He could sense that this wasn't the final and complete form of the ancient god giant. Na Wei's activation of the god brain had just reached 80%, but he could actually form this Pangu Overlord body. Against this overlord body, Xiang Yi's 8,000-year bullet just now had only tickled him, let alone piercing him. This aura was so astonishing that it increased the sense of oppression in this supreme world all at once, making people feel suffocated. Be careful, ladies. Seeing this, Monk Jin Deng hurriedly protected Lotus Sun and Jamiya Ryoko, and immediately took them into his core world. What he was most worried about was the safety of Lotus Sun and Ryoko Kamiya. Because once these two people were injured, the result was terrible. It was nothing more than triggering two endings. That was the destruction of the world, and the destruction of the world. At the same time, on the other side, Wang Ling also sensed strong fluctuations coming from another supreme world in the infinite heavens. He controlled the heavens. The power of the world of heavens could reach any space in the universe. Even if one was in the world of heavens, one could easily sense the resonance from the other lower spaces. He knew that this was not the full power of that smell. With the passage of time, he would become even stronger. Although Anwan and Leng Ming were in the supreme world on the other side, they were clearly enemies that he could easily deal with, and he didn't think it was worth it for his little sister to take this risk. After all, Anwan had just been born. As the master of Shadow Dao, although she was powerful, she would still have to bear some risks if she were to fight against a boss monster in a map. For example, hair loss. If it was a little more serious, he might even bruise his skin. Thus, he decided to settle the battle under him as soon as possible and stop playing around. Of course, he wasn't doing this entirely for Wang Nuan. After all, his birthday was coming up soon. If he didn't settle it now, and this dragged on until the day after tomorrow, wouldn't it be a huge loss if he couldn't get his birthday present? Right, he wasn't going there to save Lotus Sunday. He just wanted to make sure that the people who bought his present wouldn't get hurt. At that moment, in the world of heavens, a massive millstone broke through the clouds as Wang Ling's king's eye released endless eye power. This millstone had a radius of 3,000 zhang, and it was so shocking that people couldn't speak. At that moment, it was as if heaven and earth had been connected. Endless thunderbolts fell from the clouds, electric currents ran rampant on the millstone, and mystical runes that no one could understand appeared on the millstone. At that moment, the 9 hosts were completely stupefied. They had thought that they could fight Wang Ling. It wasn't until the instant Wang Ling took out this millstone that they realized that they had almost no chance of winning this battle. At that moment, the 9 remaining hosts felt their vision darken, and a sharp pain radiated from their bodies. They were utterly shocked. They had never thought that the man in front of them would actually have such a terrifying thing. The Great Universe Chaos Millstone. This was a supreme chaos magic weapon derived from the fusion of the power of many great Daos and the power of chaos. Back in the domain of the gods, a chaos magic weapon with only a few % of the power of chaos had been fought over by several great Dao family heads. But this, Great Universe Chaos Millstone, that Wang Ling had taken out now had 97% of the power of chaos. It was almost full. So here was the question. What on earth was this chaos millstone used for? As far as cultivators on earth knew, spells could be divided into levels 1 to 15. Among them, spells that surpassed the 10th grade could already be recognized as transcendent spells. And this, Great Universe Chaos Millstone, was a combination of super spells. Furthermore, the lowest level spell was at level 99 and above. It could reach as high as level 99. In other words, all the creatures targeted by the Chaos Millstone would be randomly chosen by one of the spells from the lowest level to the highest level of 999 and receive the punishment. If they didn't die straight away after the punishment, they would receive a reward from the Chaos Millstone, and might even be able to directly advance. But if they died, they wouldn't even have the right to be reincarnated, and would be directly destroyed. The 9 hosts were all ancient creatures. They had only heard legends about the Chaos Millstone, but had never seen it with their own eyes. They didn't believe that such a thing actually existed in the universe. Until now, when this Chaos Millstone appeared in front of them for real. They instantly realized that they had lost the upper hand. Now, the 9 hosts realized what was going on. Wang Ling had been using level 10 spells the whole time just now, and had simply been toying with them. The gap between level 10 spells and the lowest level 99 spells was really outrageous. No matter how strong their resurrection abilities were, under the bombardment of a level 99 spell, they would definitely be smashed to smithereens. Could they survive to receive a reward? That was simply impossible, because no one had ever survived an attack from the Chaos Millstone. The most outrageous thing was that before the Chaos Millstone launched its attack, a very pleasant female voice actually came from the Chaos Millstone. Congratulations, creature number SCB-002. You are about to receive a level 99 spell as punishment, Heaven Burial Godfire. The spell will be ready in 1 second. There was no time to react. In the next second, as the chaos millstone turned gently, a pillar of fire 10,000 feet high rose out of thin air from under 002's feet. For a moment, the flames soared into the sky, and the red light of hell illuminated the entire heavenly world. 002 was burned to ashes on the spot, forever becoming a speck of dust in the universe. Chapter 1681. The expressions of several of the shelter creatures instantly changed. This was too strong, it was simply a dimensional reduction attack. Number 002's battle strength was already above average among the shelter creatures, but under the effect of the Chaos Millstone, he couldn't even withstand the lowest level 99 spell. When the Heaven Burial Divine Fire's fire bamboo rose from the ground, it was accompanied by hellish devouring flames, so scorching that it swallowed up the sky and the earth. The other shelter creatures instantly jumped away and hid as far away as they could. Number 002, who had been precisely targeted, wasn't so lucky. When he turned his head, he had already been reduced to ashes, and the place where he had died had turned into a sea of fire. From a distance, the place was drowned in the aura of the Great Tao, and all kinds of laws and order intertwined to form a forbidden zone that no one dared set foot in. Forget taking a direct hit from the Heaven Burial Divine Fire's pillar of fire, even the sea of fire left behind by it wasn't something that any of the shelter creatures here could withstand. One had been killed in an instant. Now, there were 8 shelter creatures left. Furthermore, none of them could escape. When the millstone had been summoned, Wang Ying had also appeared, arms crossed as he secretly observed on the side. He was glad that he had chosen to return to Wang Ling's body back then. Otherwise, he might have ended up the same as these shelter creatures. Because this Chaos Millstone was also an ability that he didn't possess. He could see that it was a product of the King's Eye. As a shadow, the only thing that he couldn't replicate from Wang Ling was the King's Eye. He had never thought that this man's King's Eye could actually produce such a godly object. A chaos weapon with 97% power of chaos and close to 100%. Just looking at it made one feel like they had given up all hope of survival. The most outrageous thing was, in that moment, these seemingly fearless shelter creatures were actually forced to speak the human language, and they started to kneel and beg Wang Ling for mercy. "We were wrong," several of the shelter creatures knelt on the ground. Although they had been making strange noises since the beginning of the battle and hadn't said a word, that didn't mean they couldn't speak the human language. Deep in their bones, these hosted creatures still held a kind of contempt for human cultivators. They believed that human cultivators were nothing more than low-level creatures derived from the Great Tao. But now, when this kind of low-level creature appeared in front of them with such crushing destructive power, the involuntary fear and awe they felt forced them to bow their heads and surrender in front of Wang Ling, giving up all their dignity as they knelt on the ground. Wang Ling swept an indifferent glance over the host creatures without saying a word. He was not a devil. He had indeed thought of leaving a few of the Old Sun faction's sheltered creatures for subsequent research. The few that had surrendered now were the sheltered creatures of 005, 007, and 009, and they were all from the old days. This was exactly what Wang Ling wanted. So he used the King's Eye to move the Death Omen star away from the 3 containment creatures. Almost immediately, the Chaos Millstone received the order to cancel the punishment against the 3 hosts. Moreover, it released a beam of golden light to protect the 3 hosts from the shockwaves. At the same time, the next round of punishment began. In the Chaos Millstone, the indifferent and emotionless female voice rang out again with the supreme might of the Great Tao, as if it represented the heavens. "Congratulations, host SCB-003. You are about to receive the punishment of a level 188 spell, 8 tones death knell. The spell will be ready in 1 second." As soon as the voice fell, a huge ancient black bell appeared in the air. It was faint and illusory, but carried with it an extremely terrifying threat of death. An invisible sound wave was transmitted precisely, containing 8 different sins and emotions: pride, jealousy, wrath, sloth, greed, lust, gluttony, and not voting monthly. These 8 kinds of sins and emotions were outlined together, integrated, and condensed into a horrendous roar of the Great Path like a hemp rope. It swallowed number 003 in an instant. He was directly hit by the sound wave and then disintegrated into fine powder. Before he died, he let out an extremely mournful scream and tried to use his own methods to resist, but his resistance was like an ant trying to shake a tree. Because what number 003 was facing was a level 188 directional spell. The pain of being shattered into powder by the sound wave was no different from death by 1,000 cuts, no. It was even more painful than death by 1,000 cuts. Especially in the moments before death, one would feel as if countless knives were stabbing into their bodies and cutting off their flesh bit by bit. This was a merciless massacre and annihilation. At the moment when number 003 was dealt with, a few more new hosts knelt down and chose to submit. But this time, the Chaos Millstone didn't stop its punishment. The Chaos Millstone's redemption mechanism existed, but that didn't mean that it could be redeemed without limit. If someone didn't surrender the first time, the Chaos Millstone would automatically blacklist them, and by then, it would be too late. Even with Wang Ling's permission, the Chaos Millstone couldn't stop. Unless the entire Chaos Millstone was destroyed. Faced with these creatures of the old days, Wang Ling naturally couldn't destroy the Chaos Millstone, which would be of great use in the future. It could only be said that the chance for redemption was in his own hands. After dealing with the third host creature, Wang Ling opened the King's Eye space again and put 005, 007, and 009, who had already surrendered, into it. As for the rest, everything in the heavenly realms could be easily handled by the Chaos Millstone. The most important battle was on the other side of the battlefield. In a situation where An Wan's hair could be burned off at any moment or she might get hurt, no matter how expressionless her big brother was, he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Wang Ling realized that he did seem to have changed a little since An Wan was born. He could feel a little of the human warmth that he had never cared about in the past. But for some reason, there were times when he still felt stifled. Especially when he saw Lotus Sunday. There was always a knot in his heart that he couldn't untie. Sometimes, it would even make him ache dully. And now, Wang Ling called it an ill-fated relationship, but from the looks of it, this ill-fated relationship wouldn't be broken so easily. Even Wang Ling himself didn't realize it. Unknowingly, some people had already entered his world. She was sparkling, but in that world full of darkness, she didn't seem to be so sparkling. But even so. At this time, that little bit of brightness was already the only light in that world. At that moment, when Wang Ling opened his eyes again. In front of him, he had already locked onto the supreme world where the ancient god giant resided. Below. It was time for him to perform. Chapter 1682. As the god brain came to life, the pressure from the ancient god giant intensified. He stood tall, and his huge body exuded an indescribable majesty. Every move he made exuded the aura of a supreme being. He looked very much like Pangu, who split the heavens and earth apart. At least in Ryoko's opinion, there wasn't much difference between the two. She was hiding in Golden Lamp Monk's inner world with Lotus Sunday compared to Lotus Sun, who was already used to such things. The shock in Kamiya Ryoko's heart could not be any greater. Only those who had personally experienced it would understand. Given her cultivation and talent, Ryoko felt that if she hadn't met Ajua, Lotus Sun, Wang Ling, and the members of Battle Sect, she probably wouldn't have been able to witness such a grand scene in her lifetime. The visual impact, pressure, and shock brought about by such a close distance were simply too astonishing. It was far from comparable to the fictional scenes of cultivators fighting in real life plus CG special effects in cultivation cinemas. Don't be too nervous, Yoshiko. We're safe in Senior Golden Lamp's inner world, Lotus Sun comforted her. In fact, with her current combat strength, with the protection of Mysterious Sea's sword chi, she didn't need the protection of the inner world at all, but Senior Golden Lamp still kept her here. In fact, she understood why. He wanted her to comfort Ryoko Kwamiya. As a small cultivator, it was easy to get carried away when seeing such a big scene for the first time. It could easily lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, and adrenaline levels. Lotus Sun had also experienced this feeling back then, so how could she not understand? But now, he had gotten used to it after looking at it for a while. Furthermore, Lotus Sun guessed that given Aju's personality as a peerlessly good man who doted on his wife, it was highly likely that he would apply for a lot of girlfriend benefits for Ryoko Kamiya. Her realm would definitely advance by leaps and bounds, and she might even have all kinds of enviable magic treasures. Of course, what Lotus Sun envied wasn't battle prowess, magic, or magic treasures. As long as she was willing to ask for these things, she felt that Wang Ling absolutely wouldn't be so stingy with her. So the crux of the problem was still to pamper him. A girl, of course, what she wanted the most was to be pampered. Did she lack money to buy all these dazzling magical weapons and spells? She only hoped that the blockhead would take the initiative. But for now, Lotus Sun felt that this was an extravagant wish. The Divine Brain's activation is about to reach 100%. Today, I will show you how powerful it is to possess the strongest divine brain in the entire universe. At that moment, the ancient god giant's voice came out of his body. It was a kind of mental wave that was emitted through brain waves. He did not open his mouth, but his voice was transmitted to everyone's ears. Then, in front of everyone's naked eyes, the ancient god giant's body started to shrink. In just a moment, it had shrunk to the size of an ordinary person. This was a smaller version of the ancient god giant, but it was more capable than the original. He actually condensed those ancient godly weapons that he absorbed into his body into the size of cell particles on his body. Monk Golden Lamp frowned as he saw through Na Wei's change at a glance. A total of 27,000 new ancient mystic weapons had been compressed by the god brain to the size of a cell. This also meant that Na Wei's physical body was much stronger than before. It was like a sponge that had been compressed to the limit. When the density decreased, its strength also increased. Of course, this was not the scariest part. Of course, the scariest part was, these new ancient mystic weapons that had turned into cell particles could really divide inside his body like human cells. Even if a new ancient mystic weapon only had the strength of a Tao god, perhaps when the 27,000 Tao gods merged into one, the people of Battle's sect might be able to fight back with their combined strength, but if they continued to divide, in the end, there would be hundreds of millions, or even tens of billions, and it would be hard to say what the outcome would be. So that's what you were aiming for when you fused with him from the beginning. Loopy Toad also started to get nervous. Although Na Wei had become smaller, after being compressed, his aura was becoming stronger and stronger as his body continued to divide. Instead, he was even harder to deal with than the ancient god giant had been at the beginning. Na Wei, who had shrunk to the size of a normal human, had changed his appearance as well. He was extraordinarily handsome and moving. His entire body was fair, and his firm and refined muscles were carved on his body, making him look like a work of art. He wasn't wearing anything on his upper body, and his white Taoist robe hung loosely around his waist. From a distance, it looked like a pure and holy white dress. Na Wei's original body was that of an old man with a beard. Who would have thought that after merging with so many new ancient mystic weapons, his appearance and form would change fundamentally? At this time, his silver hair fluttered down, exuding an astonishing domineering aura. His unadorned white Taoist robe fluttered in the wind. With one step, thunder and lightning struck, and the wind swept away the clouds. Using his body as a guide, he turned into a beam of light and rushed toward Monk Jin Dang. This speed was so astonishing that it was like a thunderclap on the ground. It was even more astonishing than distance shrinking. Although Monk Jin Dang had reacted quickly when Na Wei made his move, he had yet to control his response to this move. After a hurried palm strike, a shocking explosion erupted at the same time as the two palms collided. In that instant, with the explosion point as the center, a huge bottomless pit with a radius of several hundred feet appeared out of nowhere in the Supreme World. Then, under the influence of the nomological laws of the Supreme World, it continuously shrank and repaired itself. The impact of this palm was so powerful that blood seeped out of the corner of Golden Lamp Monk's mouth, but he still had the strength to fight. At the same time, everyone in Battle's sect also knew that Na Wei's god brain would only become stronger after it was activated to 100%. So this battle had to end as soon as possible and couldn't drag on any longer. Everyone, focus fire. Together. Grenade-throwing senior immortal said at that moment. In this situation, there was no need for strategy or command. Since they had decided to focus fire, they would naturally bring out their own unique skills. On Battle Sect's side, everyone cooperated very well. As if they had agreed beforehand, at that moment, everyone's eyes turned to Zhou Zi on one side. Zhou Zi immediately raised his hands in surrender. Seniors, what do you want? In his desperation, he already had no time to explain. Zi, listen to me. He immediately grabbed Zhou Zi by the collar and directly threw him to Golden Lamp Monk. Come, Zi, let's go. Golden Lamp Monk caught Zhou Zi and stepped forward to cast the 100% Blessed Light spell on him. The Great Concentration Spell. It actually directly compressed Zhou Zi into the size of a sniper rifle bullet. At that moment, Zhou Zi finally understood what this group of people wanted to do. But he was powerless to resist at all. Because in the next second, Xiang Yi had already loaded and stuffed him into the Nine-Yang Divine Sword. I'll help too. Then, Grenade-throwing senior immortal gave Zhou Zi a portion of the effect of his strengthened soul suppression ring and added a buff. In case anything happened to Zhou Zi, he could immediately revive on the spot. Then, Loopy Toad turned back into its dog form and used the swallowing spell to widen its mouth so that Xiang Yi could enter it and shoot. The combination of the swallowing spell and the sniper rifle provided an effect similar to that of a loudspeaker's turret. I'll help too. Everyone went forward. As a koi, Qin Zong naturally couldn't sit idly by. He also jumped into Loopy Toad's mouth and grabbed the Nine-Yang Divine Sword with Xiang Yi. And the moment he pulled the trigger, Wang Nuan and Leng Ming acted at the same time. One used the power of Shadow Dao to double the bullet's strength. The other used his sword chi to open a path for the bullet to avoid interference from external objects. And so, the next second, it was accompanied by a loud bang. The most powerful bullet in the universe shot out of the Nine-Yang Divine Sword and accurately aimed at Na Wei's head. Chapter 1683. Boom. At this moment, the entire Supreme World was shaken by this, Zhou Zi's bullet. Na Wei's expression was calm at first, because as the ancient divine weapon in his body continued to split like cells, his physical strength would only grow stronger. He would not be afraid of Xiang Yi's bullet, which was formed from his cultivation base, even if it was tens of thousands of years later. However, when he saw that everyone in the battle sect was united, and that everyone had used their unique skills and poured them into this bullet, his heart, which had been as calm as still water, could not help but jump. He had never thought that the Nine-Yang Divine Sword could be used in such a way. Using a living person as a bullet, this kind of imaginative operation was the first time Na Wei had seen something like this, even with his vast knowledge of the past and present after inheriting the Pantheon brain. At this moment, he felt a sense of tension in his brain. If he was hit by this bullet, without a doubt, he would die. Therefore, he could not let this happen. Boom! At this moment, in the sky, endless lightning struck down, destroying everything. Time in the Supreme World seemed to have frozen, and gravity was adjusted. All the power was condensed and exploded, all for the sake of stopping Zhou Zi's bullet that was heading straight for his head. At this moment, intense rumbling sounds caused the world to crumble. Endless supreme auras extended out in this place, filling up the entire void space. Countless cracks formed in the Supreme World from all directions. All the boulders in the Paramount World floated up and rushed toward the bullet that was designed to weaken its power. However, Leng Ming's sword chi protection was especially on point. Compared to the dark scene of the collapse of the entire Supreme World, that little bit of green light seemed to be nothing, but it played a vital role, protecting the bullet as it advanced bravely. Foolish descendants, you don't even know what the power of eternity is. Na Wei's heart was full of dissatisfaction, because among these people from the battle sect, other than the Golden Lamp Monk, almost no one could be called a true eternal one. Even if they came out from the Time's secret realm, they were just defective goods that sought quick success. They did not understand what the pride and lofty ideals of an eternal were. A true eternal being was someone who had lived from that era to the present. Their memories were the whole story, and they controlled the ancient epic that ordinary cultivators could not touch. It was precisely because of this that Na Wei wanted to use his own strength to face the difference in value between him and these cultivators of the later generations. As a senior, he wanted to tell these young cultivators what it meant to be a dimensionality reduction attack that was not on the same level as them. But now, with Zhou Zi's bullet that was about to take his life, Na Wei's mind began to waver. He began to doubt whether his thoughts were wrong, and he even wondered if he was really old. In the face of this indomitable bullet, Qin Xiaolian was shocked. At this moment, Na Wei realized that his resistance with all his might seemed to be useless. Zhou Zi's bullet was too strong. It had the power to destroy the world, as if it could sever karma. In that short moment, no matter how Na Wei tried to use the Pantheon brain to deduce the bullet's future, his mind went blank. He can actually do this. Na Wei's spirit fell into a momentary stagnation. What a pity, just a little bit more and I'll be invincible. After saying this, he sighed softly and slowly closed his eyes. Thanks to the combined efforts of everyone in Battle Sect, Zhou Zi's bullet finally accurately pierced Na Wei's head and hit the bullseye. His entire head exploded in an instant. His head was separated from his body, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. The space had directly swallowed it up the instant the bullet had passed through. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal hadn't expected this well-coordinated attack, which everyone had worked together, to be surprisingly effective. By the way, what should we do with Z? If we don't stop him, won't he just keep flying? It wasn't until he finished shooting that he suddenly thought of this problem. That won't happen. My 9-yang divine sword has a resource return function, and bullets that I shoot will eventually return to me. Brother Z is no exception. Xiang Yi smiled. But I really never thought that there would actually be a way to play with human bullets. But did we really kill him? Loopy Toad was a little doubtful about this. That Na Wei just now was really close to being invincible. As long as the God Brain was fully activated, even with Wang Nuan's current strength, she might not be able to fight Na Wei one-on-one for a few more years before she grew up. He's indeed dead. I can feel that Na Wei's aura has disappeared. It's completely gone, Qin Zong said at that moment. Although he said this, the expression on his face was the same as Loopy Toad's. There was a certain solemnness in it. The moment Na Wei died, Qin Zong felt that he had understood a lot of things. Since ancient times, these immortals had pursued supreme power, and until just now had even regarded later generation cultivators as ants. It could be said that this was the immortals' arrogance. But the truth was that the cultivation world of later generations was indeed no longer as good as the immortals' era, when heroes contended for supremacy. Although the current era was an era of scientific cultivation for all, it wasn't clear whether they had progressed or regressed compared with the Immortals era. It was hard to say. Everyone waited in the Supreme World for a while. They had originally planned to wait for Na Wei to die and for the Supreme World to collapse even more before they focused their fire to break through. But very quickly, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal suddenly realized that the Supreme World seemed to have suddenly paused at some point. How's that possible? He frowned. The master of the Supreme World was already dead, so it was only a matter of time before the world collapsed. No, it's not over yet. At that moment, Monk Jin Dang saw a pure and holy light in front of him. Without thinking, he shrank the ground to an inch and turned into a streak of rainbow light as he flashed over. The rest of the Battle Sect members followed closely behind. Then, the scene in front of them dumbfounded them once again. In the air, a human brain shining with silver light was actually taking shape. The God Brain is 100% activated. Jin Dang immediately knew what had happened. It turned out that in the last moment before the bullet had smashed the God Brain, Na Wei's God Brain had completed a synchronized 100% activation. But for some reason, Jin Dang had a feeling. He felt that the person who had come back to life was no longer Na Wei. Instead, it was filled with an aura of old age, loneliness, desolation, and death. Rip. Leng Ming slashed out with his sword. In the end, his sword chi didn't harm the god brain itself. This god brain was actually illusory and didn't exist in the same space as them. Instead, it had used a method of space division to hide itself. Then, it continued to shine with silver light, and blood vessels began to grow with the brain as the center. Finally, they formed a spiral, and little by little, they converged into the appearance of the handsome young man from before. It was just that this young man no longer spoke in Na Wei's voice. Jin Deng, long time no see. How are you? The young man curled his lips and smiled as he familiarized himself with his new body. Monk Jin Deng sighed and replied, Wu Xin, in the end, you still survived this way. The person in front of him wasn't just anyone. It was Na Wei's Shifu, the heartless patriarch himself. Back then, he was the only one who had deceived Dao Patriarch Wang and deceived the world. Chapter 1684. With the resurrection of the heartless ancestor in this way, the master of the supreme world was replaced, and new cracks no longer formed, and there was a tendency to gradually heal. This was the first cultivator in the entire universe to achieve complete mechanization of himself. There were only rotating ice wheels and oil left in his body, so no matter where he went, he was always silent, and it was impossible to detect his existence through normal spiritual senses. At that time, the monk remembered very clearly that Heartless had been ostracized by the other ancient beings and called a monster of the cultivation world. However, it was this monster that escaped Dao Ancestor Wang's punishment in the end. Not only did it use a fake body to deceive Dao Ancestor Wang, it even secretly developed an ancient divine weapon to help the grave god create a batch of mechanical cultivators that had yet to be completely wiped out. So, Heartless came back to life in this way. Is this also part of your plan? Monk Golden Lamp understood very well. I wanted to share the joy of success with Na Wei. But unfortunately, the development of cultivation technology will eventually be accompanied by sacrifices. I did leave a backup plan, yes. But, Heartless said coldly, in this way, I resurrected by borrowing a body. It was not my intention. So I gave Na Wei a chance. As long as the activation of the god brain is below 99%, the body can still be controlled by him. Once the limit is crossed, I will take over. He said it like this, and he said it very sincerely, as if he was not lying. At this point, there was no reason to continue lying. Monk Golden Lamp knew very well that the god brain was very powerful. Once it reached 100% activation, it could even distort reality and create a new world. Therefore, as long as the god brain was not destroyed, in theory, Heartless would be in an indestructible state. And he only needed to hide the god brain. Zhou Zi's bullet just now had indeed hit Na Wei's skull. But at the same time, after the Heartless ancestor took over the battle, he began to quickly control the entire battle situation, and the first thing he did was to divide the god brain into layers. The god brain that they had smashed was transformed by the god brain's ability to divide into layers at the critical moment. And the real god brain had been hidden by Heartless. This method was very similar to some boys who liked to create hundreds of new folders of indescribable films to set up a maze, and also label the folders with the words, I want to study hard. In the end, it was actually a similar trick. As long as the god brain was alive, Heartless was alive. Now that the primordial ones were no longer in the mood to take over the battlefield, the nature of the paramount world changed. The paramount world, which was originally a huge stone array, suddenly turned into a dark, scorched earth that was filled with a deathly stillness. Countless sparrow-like black birds with extremely long beaks circled in the air, giving off an ominous feeling. Chaos Bird of Death. Monk Jin Deng was in a trance as he recognized the creature's origin. At the same time, he was secretly surprised. That was because this was a type of bird that had gone extinct since ancient times and was also an uncountable number of creatures that were born from the chaos. Chi. Suddenly, a bird of death turned into a pitch-black light and swooped down from the distance. It was extremely fast like a ghost, bringing with it a powerful pressure. No one thought that a sparrow-sized creature could give off such a terrifying sense of oppression. It really wasn't that big. However, He did not fear death at all. They launched a suicide attack here. Those who were directly hit by the chaos bird of death's beak would be dragged into the chaos and await death. However, as an eternal one, Monk Jin Dang was naturally not so easy to deal with. He set up the indestructible Vajra light, forming layers of barriers in an attempt to resist the bird of death's attack. However, the bird of death in the air seemed to have already expected this move from the monk. It changed its attack direction at the last moment and stabbed toward Qin Zong in the distance. To be honest, Qin Zong's reaction was a little slow. After all, he was only a Dao god. Such combat power could not fight against a terrifying extinct creature like the bird of death. He froze in place. As a result, the bird of death directly passed by his scalp and smashed behind him. Immediately, there was a big explosion behind Qin Zong, and a round pit with a radius of 100 feet was blasted by the overflowing chaos chi. Qin Zong had always been confident that he was the only koi in the cultivation world and had nothing to fear. He was indeed lucky to have dodged the attack just now. However, for some reason, when the bird of death passed by his scalp, he still felt a sense of fear as if he was facing death. I see. Is the one standing over there a great success in gathering destiny? Apart from Monk Jin Dang, he didn't know the rest of the people standing here, and he didn't get any memories of these people from Na Wei. Therefore, he summoned these birds of death just to test, but he didn't expect to test out an extraordinary person. The chaos bird of death was a symbol of bad luck. It was an existence that specialized in restraining destiny. Perhaps one attack would fail, but if a few more were prepared, the situation might not be so. In the past, many of the extinct chaotic creatures were actually not really extinct. Instead, they were taken by Wu Xian and transformed. Now these transformed chaotic creatures were like him, becoming silent existences that could not be locked on by normal sensing means. Therefore, chaotic creatures like the bird of death, which had the ability to attack in a suicidal manner, became a natural killing machine. When thousands of birds of death hovered in the air like a black cloud, the sense of shock and oppression was self-evident. Even Qin Zong began to panic. Because these birds of death that divided destiny were indeed affecting him. He could clearly feel that the auspicious cloud above his head was weakening. How could this be? He couldn't believe it. It was just that a different person was operating it, but its aura was completely different from before. This was the Eternal One. In a scorched world that seemed like the end of the world, Wu Xian's body was emitting a snow-white light. He stood there, holy like a god, with a great and immortal aura. At the same time, he was also releasing an extremely terrifying spiritual wave that froze the people of the battle sect in place. Qin Zong was a person of great destiny. To be honest, Wu Xian didn't want to kill Qin Zong just like that. If he could be brought back alive for research, that would be the best. Apart from that, he also felt something very interesting. That was, on this battlefield, there was a baby girl who had already bred a sword spirit. Why is there a baby? Wu Xian released the fluctuations of the god brain and shone it on Wang Nuan. He tried to use the power of the god brain to analyze, and the conclusion he got told him that this was indeed a child that had just been born. And the most important thing was, this baby girl's aura was very strange. When he used the god brain to inspect, he actually had a vague feeling. And in the next second, above the baby girl's head, black birds of death that were the same number as him appeared. Like shadows, they were doing the same movement as the birds of death that he was controlling. No, they were not like shadows. These birds of death seemed to be shadows. This baby girl was a lord of the Tao. At this moment, Wu Xian's heart was in extreme shock. What kind of joke was this? Chapter 1685. As an eternal rank existence, Wu Xian controlled the cosmos god brain. He had a kind of disposition as if everything was under his control. Since ancient times, he had seen too many incredible epics. He had seen all kinds of big and small scenes, and he had fought with all kinds of peerless experts and geniuses. In ancient times, some cultivators with only 100 years of cultivation could compete with old monsters who had cultivated for thousands of years. These were geniuses. And these geniuses were later killed by him and made into specimens. Therefore, collecting specimens of these geniuses became a small hobby that Wu Xian hid in secret. But now, a baby girl who understood the Great Way had appeared in front of him. This little hobby, that had been dusty for many years, was stimulated again at this moment. A baby who knew how to use the Great Way at birth? This shocked Wu Xian to the extreme. He was full of excitement, as if he could already see Wang Yuan being made into a perfect specimen by him. This was no longer a genius. It was a genius that had never appeared since ancient times, and he had never had the experience of making such a genius into a specimen. The strong special collecting hobby made Wu Xian go crazy again at this moment. Even if he didn't say a word or move, the terrifying aura released from his body was enough to make people tremble. Wu Xian, your way of thinking is very dangerous. You have no idea what you are facing. Jin Dang Monk, as one of the ancient ones who knew Wu Xian well, advised him. There was no need to read his mind. Just by looking at Wu Xian's eyes and the aura that kept surging up, Jin Dang Monk knew that this person's collecting hobby was acting up again. In the past, because of this hobby, Wu Xian had offended many people. Therefore, every time he fancied a heavenly genius and wanted to use him as a specimen, he would definitely prepare for battle. Even the clan of this heavenly genius would be annihilated. This was to prevent his descendants from seeking revenge. Now, ancient times had passed. The moment Wu Xian saw Wang Yuan, Jin Dang Monk didn't expect that his strange hobby would be aroused again. But this time, it seemed to be different from ancient times. Compared to Wang Yuan, those peerless geniuses of the ancient era were not even on the same level. Moreover, behind Wang Yuan stood that terrifying man. But it was clear that Wu Xian hadn't considered that much. His eyes were burning, and in the next second, he chose to attack Wang Yuan. The instantaneous killing intent was shocking. Boom! At this moment, the ground of the supreme world trembled, and rays of golden auspicious light burst forth. An exquisite half-body ancient god with 8 faces and 8 arms appeared out of thin air, wearing a suit of golden armor. One of his arms held a grayish-green ancient sword. With just a wave of his arm, a powerful sword chi swept out, separating the battlefield between Wu Xian and the people of Battle Sect, leaving behind a deep ravine. At the same time, it also dissolved Wu Xian's palm energy. This was Xiang Yi's unique 8-armed ancient god. The moment it appeared, it attracted everyone's attention. Magical rings flowed around its body, and it was filled with an immortal aura. Wu Xian raised his eyebrows and stared at the 8-armed ancient god. He was surprised to find that it was an existence that he had never seen before. This 8-armed ancient deity from the other side gave off a type of otherworldly feeling. When it appeared, golden and purple light surged around it, as if it connected to the underworld. It was extremely unordinary and possessed a tremendous pressure. Yellow Springs Chaos Tao, so that's how it is. Wu Xian observed for a long time, and suddenly realized the origin of this 8-armed ancient god. This was the power of the Yellow Springs Chaos Tao. Back then, a genius who was made into a specimen by him naturally comprehended this Tao method. Logically speaking, this Tao method should have been extinct and should not appear again. Unexpectedly, that person found his successor before he died. No wonder when he wanted to steal this Tao method back then, he couldn't find any memories of this Tao method in that youth's body. Interesting. At this moment, Wu Xian spoke lightly. His eyes were piercingly cold, and there was a kind of killing intent in them. A baby girl who knew how to use the Tao not long after being born, the only koi in the cultivation world that gathered destiny, and this man who inherited the Yellow Springs Chaos Tao, these were all the best subjects that he could use to make specimens out of. Today, all of you here will become part of my collection. Boom! With Wu Xian as the center, the god brain's powerful oppressive force was released in waves, and everyone present felt their chi and blood churn. Monk Jin Dang had told them at the beginning how strong a fully activated god brain was, but it wasn't until this moment that they truly understood how oppressive it was. Qin Zong and Xiang Yi cried out in their hearts at the same time. It could only be said that this was Ling Jinren's strongest enemy in this world. It was only in Wang Ling's universe that they could run into a boss of this level, who could almost be called a monster. They were now at the top of their respective worlds, and the most powerful enemy they had ever encountered wasn't even 1% as strong as Wu Xian in front of them. Is this the Ancient One? At that moment, both of them were in a trance, and felt that this was too terrifying. Even though Xiang Yi had summoned this 8-armed ancient god and was using his own abilities to resist the pressure, this ancient god that could shake the heavens and earth in his original world felt as fragile as a piece of paper in front of this ancient being. Be careful, everyone, the Ancient One is about to make a move. Loopy Toad said with a pale face. As an existence that had just been bathed in chaos and had been reborn to become a divine beast, it went without saying that it was very sensitive to the power of chaos. At that moment, Wu Xian just stood there, and in Loopy Toad's view, the chaos chi surging around him was even more terrifying than the chaos calamity back then. At that moment, the immortal battle between the Ancient One and Battle Sect was about to begin. If they couldn't stop Wu Xian in this supreme world, the entire universe might face a catastrophe. For this kind of specimen maniac with a special hobby, it wasn't just geniuses who could be made into specimens. All the strange creatures and planets in the world, as long as they caught his eye, they could be collected. All of you know nothing about power. All you can do is do something useless. At that moment, Wu Xian's voice rang out in the minds of everyone in Battle Sect. It was just a light sentence, but it carried with it a terrifying change, as if it could reach all the way back to ancient times. Behind him, all kinds of dazzling light were superimposed and released, and countless black ribbons connected to his back before they converged to form a massive purple-gold rudder in front of him. I want to show you who is at the helm of the universe, Wu Xian said. He raised his hand to touch the rudder, and with a light turn, the air behind him was instantly annihilated and blurred, as if countless karma and nomological laws had been twisted and severed by this turn. This kind of oppressive feeling was terrifying. At that moment, everyone in Battle Sect was under immense pressure. Odd Zhua, grenade-throwing senior immortal and Loopy Toad were shaken by this tremendous force and spat out blood. On the other side, Zhou Zi, who was wearing multiple layers of long johns, shivered a little at this scene after being shot out like a bullet. But he and Wang Nuan were the only two people present who were unscathed. Chapter 1686. Wang Nuan had the power of Shadow Dao to protect her body. That kind of power of learning from the weak and using the weak to counter the weak was equivalent. Shadow Dao was a great Dao that grew stronger with the strong. Only a few things could not be replicated by Shadow Dao. Although Anwan was still very young, she could distinguish between good and evil. In the face of such an arrogant primordial one, she could naturally sense the malice emanating from that evil god brain. Girl, don't look at me like that. The universe is about to fall into chaos. If I can obtain your power as the master of great Dao, you might be able to help me set things right. At that moment, the heartless patriarch held the rudder in his hand. Behind him was the void that was constantly being destroyed and reformed, and cracks spread out in all directions like a rainbow spider web. Although Wang Nuan was the master of Shadow Dao and the person whom the heartless patriarch considered to be the most difficult person to deal with, as the rudder of the universe, he was completely uninterested. This rudder of chaos was the most powerful chaos magic weapon he had discovered when he had traveled through the chaos, and it had 60% of the power of chaos. It could almost be said to be an existence that could insta-kill all existing chaos magic weapons. At that time, Heartless had known that as long as he controlled this rudder, he would control the entire universe. But given his age at that time, he was already half a foot in the grave. Even if he constantly replaced his mechanized organs, it wouldn't be of any use, since there was no way to prevent the aging of the soul. Thus, Heartless came up with a solution. That was to find a successor, then turn the god brain's inheritance ceremony into a scam, and finally wait for his resurrection. With a younger body and a younger soul, plus a 100% activated god brain, it would be a piece of cake to use this new body to control the rudder of chaos. Full rudder right. He shouted softly, and as he flipped the rudder, the entire horizon of the supreme world started to tilt to the right. Everyone from Battle Sect stood on the spot, unsteady. As a unit of combat strength, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was in an even more tragic state. As the ground turned sideways, his entire body directly collided with the chaos cracks, and he was instantly swallowed up by them and turned into flying ashes. Then, everyone saw the ashes that grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had turned into reassemble in front of them at a speed visible to the naked eye. As expected of a Senior Immortal, the title of Great Death-Courting Senior has finally been established. Odd Chua sweated profusely in his heart. He had long since heard that Wang Ling had customized a set of courting death Tao scripture for grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's characteristics. In any case, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had the soul suppression ring which Wang Ling had given him and which had already been strengthened to plus 999, so he wouldn't die no matter how badly injured he was. This courting death Tao scripture was very suitable for grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. It was said that every time he unlocked a new method of death, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's battle strength would rise to a higher level. Sure enough, after grenade-throwing Senior Immortal turned into ashes and reformed into human form, his aura was much stronger than before. I died, but I became stronger. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said excitedly. Then in the next second. Boom! Bam! As the Heartless Ancestor steered the ship, a bolt of primordial divine thunder fell from the sky and blew grenade-throwing Senior Immortal into bloody foam again. Forget it, there's no need to worry about the true monarch. The perfected lord was constantly becoming stronger. We still have to think of a way to destroy this ship's rudder. Monk Jin Deng said, a complicated look on his fair and handsome face. He never thought that he would meet the Heartless Ancestor under these circumstances. After not seeing him for so many years, he felt that Wu Xin had changed a lot. At the very least, the righteous Wu Xin from before was gone. It wasn't just the epic of the universe that had changed, but also people's hearts. Monk, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no way you can break this ship's rudder. You should know very well in your heart. Wu Xin laughed. To be honest, the few of you aren't good enough for me. You can barely be considered part of my collection. As he said this, he quickly turned the ship's rudder, and a ripple of spirit power combined with the power of primordial chaos spread out in all directions. Monk Jin Deng set up a Buddhist light barrier to block it. Bang! The two ripples collided with each other, creating a vast ocean of fluctuations and a violent roar. A new cosmic black hole formed at the point of impact, and endless power of primordial chaos, lightning, and spirit power were sucked in to form a terrifying storm. Wu Xin, it's none other than you who threw the universe into chaos, Monk Jin Deng said with a frown as he tried to hit the ship's rudder with Buddha's palm. Standing on the spot, Wu Xin sneered when he heard this, completely ignoring Monk Jin Deng's methods. Boom! He was even more ruthless as he connected his god brain to the ship's rudder in front of him. He didn't need to raise his hand at all, as if everything was under his control. The monk's Buddha's palm was extremely powerful as it fell from the sky, but the Heartless Ancestor didn't put up any defense at all. The moment the palm was about to fall, he tilted the ship's rudder to the right. In the end, it was as if someone had pressed a remote control button on Buddha's palm as it shifted from its original position to grenade-throwing Senior Immortal on the spot. Poor grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, who had just been resurrected, was turned into flying ashes by this palm. He can actually do this. But right now, everyone had no time to care about this unit of measurement that was constantly resurrecting. All their attention was on the rudder of chaos that the Heartless Ancestor had taken out. No one had thought that the rudder of chaos would actually be so powerful that it could actually change its trajectory. With this rudder, the Wuxin clan patriarch would be an invincible powerhouse. But Buddha's palm was, after all, just an ordinary spell. It was a supreme Buddhist spell that the monk had comprehended himself, and had nothing to do with the great Tao. Thus, the monk was still a little unconvinced. The second Buddha's palm quickly struck toward the Heartless Ancestor. And this time, it contained the power of 1,000 strands of heavenly Tao. Monk Jin Deng didn't believe that with the power of heavenly Tao, this palm could still be controlled by this strange rudder. But the result was beyond everyone's expectations once again. The rudder was too strange, as it moved, it actually exuded a terrifying aura of the beginning of the primordial world, and the powerful chaotic chi was as vast as the sea, which submerged the entire supreme world on the spot. Before monk Jin Deng's second palm could strike, its trajectory was changed to that of Wang Nuan. Furthermore, as the rudder changed its trajectory, the palm actually became stronger. How can this be? The power of the rudder was already beyond everyone's expectations. Just as Wang Nuan was about to take up a defensive stance, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of her. The man slowly crouched down, picked up little girl Nuan with one hand, and very skillfully placed her on his shoulder. Little girl Nuan also obediently lay there like a pendant. His movements were so slow that everyone could clearly see his every move, but at the same time, they were unbelievably fast. In the next second, the man came back to his senses and gently exhaled in front of him. Buddha's palm, which had been strengthened by the rudder, was once again reflected back with 1000% more power. Chapter 1687. The most important and unique ability of the Chaos Rudder was that it could instantly attach a specific invisible antenna to all attacks, which could then be remotely controlled. Whether it was a heavenly Dao spell, an ordinary spell, a magic weapon, or a spirit sword attack, everything could be controlled by the Chaos Rudder. However, when the Heartless Patriarch used the rudder to change the original trajectory of this palm strike to attack Wang Nuan, this man who had suddenly appeared actually just exhaled and changed the trajectory he had set. Furthermore, it was 1000% more powerful, which was beyond the Heartless Patriarch's understanding for a moment. This man didn't have a rudder, why could he change the trajectory of a spell? For a moment, the Heartless Patriarch's mind was a little muddled. He used the rudder to change Wang Ling's trajectory again, and in the end, this Buddha's palm was more than 1,000 times more powerful than before as it blasted into the distance. In the distance, a huge mushroom cloud rose from the flat ground, illuminating the entire supreme world. A hole was created in the sky by this palm, and countless galaxies hung down from the hole, sprinkling down a terrifying multicolored light with the power of chaos. This multicolored light was extremely gentle and beautiful, but anyone below the ancestor realm who touched it would instantly be burned to ashes. Everyone couldn't help feeling awe in the face of such a scene. Only Wang Ling and Wang Nuan were unmoved. Wang Ling wasn't afraid of this to begin with. Besides, the scene in front of them wasn't too big of a deal. While the Heartless Patriarch was a very powerful immortal, in Wang Ling's opinion, his battle strength might not even be as strong as that of the Grave God. When he picked up Wang Nuan, the only thing he felt was that Nuan was hungry. No matter how poor he was, he couldn't be poor in education, and no matter how hungry he was, he couldn't be hungry for his little sister. Little girl Nuan was still growing, and she definitely needed nutrition. So how to fill little girl Nuan's stomach was Wang Ling's #1 problem. Compared with the Grave God last time, there weren't so many tentacle monsters here that could be used as grilled squid material. Furthermore, the Heartless Patriarch in front of him was a mechanized cultivator who had nothing but engine oil and gears in his body. He couldn't feed his own little sister these things. Fortunately, Wang Ling was a clever little devil, and his reaction was very quick. He immediately set his eyes on the starry light in the distance that contained the power of chaos after the Buddha's palm had broken through space. Ordinary people couldn't touch this light. But the siblings could. It was also an excellent material for making milk powder. It contained a huge amount of chaotic energy, which was definitely enough to replenish little girl Nuan's stamina. At this moment, the entire place was silent, and it could be said that there was no one there. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Wang Ling's side as they wondered what he was going to do next. After all, with a normal person's train of thought, they would absolutely not be able to imagine that this deadly chaotic glow could actually be used to make milk powder for Wang Nuan to drink. In the next second, Wang Ling activated the power of the king's eye and sucked in all that light. Ling Zhenren, what is he doing? Using the king's eye to gather the chaotic rays? Xiang Yi asked. He's probably preparing for a big move. After all, he's little Master Ling, we can't understand his thinking, said Loopy Toad. Could it be used for something else? Qin Zong asked. At that moment, everyone in Battle's sect was discussing what on earth Wang Ling's move meant. They also didn't understand why he was collecting the chaotic rays in the king's eye. After all, if it was the king's eye that launched a shock wave of its own accord, the destructive power of destroying everything in sight was much more terrifying than the chaotic rays. Thus, there was no need to rely on this method of accumulating power to increase the power of the king's eye. Could Shifu have come up with some new spell? Odd Zhuo was full of anticipation. After all, his current opponents were different from those of the past. In the past, his opponents had all been confined to Earth and could be dealt with a single slap. But now, his opponents were all at the universe level. If they weren't born from chaos, then they were the ancient ones who had transcended mortality. One slap was already beyond repair, but the fancy beating could still continue. Odd Zhuo felt that Wang Ling's moves had basically never been repeated since he ran into a universe opponent. Every time he faced Wang Ling head-on, he would make new discoveries and experiences. Then, with these new discoveries and experiences, he would either stop thinking forever or turn into dust in the universe. Ah! Lying on Wang Ling's shoulder, little girl Nuan looked like a soft pastry with a hungry expression on her face. "It'll be ready soon," Wang Ling said softly and soothingly telepathically. His face still didn't show much of an expression, but the natural gentleness he exuded toward his little sister still deeply touched Lotus Sun's eyes. In that moment, Lotus Sun was clearly in the inner world, but she felt a faint jealousy in her heart. She knew that this kind of behavior was very childish, but she still couldn't help it. Wang Ling wanted to kill her too much. There were times when Lotus Sun couldn't tell whether this piece of wood was real or fake. He would always inadvertently do something unexpected that was completely unlike his usual style, and it was very natural, especially when he was with little girl Nuan. Thus, she began to reflect in the inner world. Maybe there was something about little girl Nuan that Wang Ling especially liked. Earlier, Lotus Sun had heard from father and mother Wang that little girl Nuan would also be going to number 60 high in the future. In other words, she could actually be considered little girl Nuan's senior sister. At that moment, Lotus Sun felt that it was very necessary for her to visit the Wang family's small villa in person as a senior sister, and improve her relationship with little girl Nuan. Although it seemed very shameful to place her hopes on a little girl for a lifetime of happiness, Lotus Sun couldn't care less now. As long as it was useful, it was fine. Just as Lotus Sun's imagination was running wild. On the other side, Wang Ling frowned and began to focus his gaze on the chaos rudder in the Heartless Patriarch's hand. Making milk powder was one thing. But it was, after all, milk powder made from chaotic glow, and a milk bottle that could hold it might have to be of a certain standard. Even if he had enchanted an ordinary milk bottle, it still wouldn't be strong enough. Little girl Nuan might crack as she drank. It wouldn't be good if the little girl got scalded. Wang Ling felt that he had never been so considerate as to actually think hard about making milk powder for his little sister. Sure enough, Mother Wang wasn't lying to him. Making milk powder was really a profound subject. So now, he focused all his attention on the chaos rudder. Because, this was an excellent material for making milk bottles. Chapter 1688. Seeing the look in Wang Ling's eyes, the Heartless Patriarch finally smiled a little. "You know what's good for you, kid. My chaos rudder can attack and defend. No matter how strong you are, it's hard for you to resist the power of my rudder. If you stop now, you and your sister will still have a chance to live." It was clear that the Heartless Patriarch had yet to understand what kind of players he was facing. After all, most of the ancient ones had taken it upon themselves to surpass Dao ancestor Wang. Now, the Heartless Patriarch had successfully used some means to revive himself and activate his god brain to 100%. He could transfer his consciousness at any time, which was equivalent to having the ability to live forever. In addition to the various magic treasures that he had accumulated during the ancient times, as well as the ship rudder that had 60% chaotic power, in terms of the strength on paper, the Wuxin ancestor's current strength had already reached the level of Dao ancestor Wang, even if it did not surpass him. As an ancient one who had set Tao ancestor Wang as his goal back then, he naturally regarded himself as an invincible existence to be able to reach this level of combat strength. Therefore, he was extremely arrogant and didn't take Wang Ling and Wang Nuan seriously at all. He could sense that the teenager and the baby girl standing in front of him weren't ordinary people, but had a variety of great Tao abilities, and were more talented than the geniuses he had seen back then. However, because of the foundation he had accumulated over the ages, he didn't believe that these two hotheads, who added up to less than 50 years old, could compete with the foundation he had built up over the ages. I need to show you what the gap is. Facing Wang Ling, the heartless patriarch's mind stirred at that moment, and a strange golden dragon scale appeared in his hand. He muttered an incantation, and the dragon scale jumped in his palm. Then, it rapidly spread out on his body like fish scales, turning into armor. In an instant, his entire body exploded with an incomparably dazzling light, so dazzling that it was dazzling to the eyes. Dragon Emperor Divine Armor. Monk Jin Dang's expression changed instantly when he saw this thing. Although this armor hadn't come from chaos, it had clearly been processed and baptized by chaos. In theory, all magic weapons could be baptized by chaos, and thus gain more power than before. However, this baptism process was risky. If the baptism failed, everything would be in vain, and even the magic weapon could be destroyed, never to return to its owner. But the Golden Lamp monk could tell that the Dragon Emperor Divine Armor in front of him had been baptized more than once. The Dragon Emperor Divine Armor, which had 40% chaotic energy, had been baptized at least 20 times, therefore, the Golden Lamp monk's face instantly turned cold. He was really surprised by the heartless ancestor's luck and was even more surprised by the appearance of the Dragon Emperor armor. This was the natal magical treasure of Priest Long, who was known as the Demonic Dragon. One of the ancient 6 heroes. In ancient times, they were publicly acknowledged to be below Tao ancestor Wang in terms of battle prowess, and they were on par with each other in all aspects. They were the 6 great figures who were evenly matched. They were crowned the 6 heroes of eternity. However, no one had mentioned this epic of the 6 martialists of eternity ever since they had gone into hiding in the universe. There had always been rumors that the immemorial 6 heroes entered the primal chaos vortex in order to search for the true meaning of primal chaos and never returned. The auras and messages of the 6 people also disappeared completely, as if they had disappeared from the universe. In other words, the Dragon Emperor Divine Armor, which originally belonged to Priest Long and should have been a legendary item that had disappeared from the universe, had now reappeared, and it was taken out by the heartless ancestor. This made the Golden Lamp monk, who was also an ancient being, feel a little incredulous. Why would the heartless ancestor have something that belonged to the 6 heroes of eternity? Could it be that he had seen the 6 heroes after they disappeared? Full of doubts, the heartless ancestor sneered again. Monk, you seem to be surprised that I took out this divine armor? Yes. After all, this Dragon Emperor Divine Armor originally belonged to Priest Long, one of the 6 heroes. But it's a pity that such a good thing can only belong to me now, and I still have a lot of it. He laughed arrogantly, and the Dragon Emperor Divine Armor on his body was shining like a fiery stone, emitting a kind of cosmic red flame, with a kind of extraordinary and amazing power, bursting out with a frightening light. Under such strong pressure, the people of the battle sect were almost in a state of defeat, and just setting up a barrier to defend was already very difficult. This Dragon Emperor Divine Armor was indeed very extraordinary. It gave off a sense of oppression, and when it was worn, it also emitted a kind of chaotic raging flame. It was a kind of purple-gold cosmic flame that could burn anything that approached it. Wang Ling examined it with the power of the king's eye, and his expression didn't change much. This Dragon Emperor armor was indeed a lot stronger than ordinary toys, but Heartless was still too immature to rely on it to withstand his attack. At that moment, Heartless saw the right opportunity, and his expression turned murderous. His palm and fingers descended from the sky with the kind of power that could crush the sun, the moon, and the stars as he swatted at the siblings. Wang Ling's heart was as calm as an ancient well, but at that moment, his eyes inadvertently revealed a murderous glint. He didn't mind Heartless attacking him, but attacking An Wan was out of the question. Wan was just a newborn child, but the other party was actually so unscrupulous and merciless in the face of such a baby. This already touched his bottom line a little. Even if he had no emotions and didn't know what anger was, this spontaneous feeling of discomfort was already enough reason for him to attack Heartless. According to the old Wang family's latest teachings, an older brother should protect his younger sister unconditionally. He should do his best to put an end to anything that could hurt his younger sister. If he was attacked by gangsters or other lawbreakers, he should fight back with all his might if necessary, regardless of the cost or the consequences. How dare this person offend Ling Junren like that? He's courting death. In the distance, Qin Zong said angrily when he saw Heartless attack Wang Ling and his sister. His reverence for Wang Ling was in fact no less than Zhu's. After all, the latter was a man whom Qin Zong revered like a god. Boom! Heartless' palm and fingers fell from the sky and turned into a huge phantom that stretched for thousands of li, making it impossible to see its trajectory clearly. At that moment, Wang Ling raised his hand and countered with a palm strike. At that moment, the powerful force of the palm overflowed from the surface of this supreme world, and the explosive destructive power formed a magic ring that spread out in all directions with Wang Ling as the center. Wen Long. Under the force of Wang Ling's one palm strike, the ground of the entire paramount world actually sank hundreds of feet. Bang! Finally, the Heartless Patriarch, who had attacked Wang Ling and his sister, had a puzzled expression on his face. In the face of the counterattack, he was sent flying all over the sky like a kite without a string, and it took him a long time to stabilize himself. He spat out a mouthful of blood. There was disbelief on the Heartless Patriarch's face. His Dragon Emperor Divine Armor had actually been smashed by Wang Ling's palm. But if it hadn't been for the Dragon Emperor Divine Armor protecting him just now, the power of that palm would have pulverized him into powder. Chapter 1689. The Dragon Emperor Divine Armor had saved his life at this critical moment. If it hadn't been for the armor's protection, the Heartless Patriarch knew that he would have died long ago. In the end, he had underestimated the power of Wang Ling's palm just now. Who would have thought that the power of this palm could actually make the ground of his supreme world sink dozens of feet? This terrifying and ferocious explosive force was so destructive that he couldn't resist it at all, and was sent flying on the spot. When he came back to his senses, the Dragon Emperor Divine Armor, which had been baptized by chaos dozens of times, had already been reduced to dust, and there was no possibility of it being repaired. In the distance, everyone from Battle's sect marveled in their hearts. Although this scene was already within expectations for those who were familiar with Wang Ling, when they saw it with their own eyes, they still couldn't help feeling shocked. If anyone's mind was blank at that moment, it was none other than Ryoko Kumiya. This was no longer a question of whether you had a lot of questions. Instead, it was a question of whether you had a lot of friends. The shocked expression on Ryoko's face was almost indescribable. It was very much like those exaggerated manga characters. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have been able to imagine how strong Wang Ling was. Is this still the classmate Wang Ling I know? She covered her slightly agape mouth with extreme astonishment as she witnessed the famous scene of Wang Ling smashing the Dragon Emperor Divine Armor with one palm and beating the Heartless Patriarch to the point of vomiting blood through the visual image shared by Monk Golden Lamp in the inner world. But what surprised her even more was yet to come. Because Wang Ling didn't look like he had any intention of holding back at all. His movements were no longer as hesitant as they had been at the beginning, and he took the initiative to launch a new round of attacks. Whoosh! Wang Ling exhaled. This was the essence of primordial qi, a substance derived from the condensation of primordial qi. At that moment, not only had Wang Ling condensed it out of his body, but it was also mixed with a kind of primordial qi, which gave it an incomparably sacred feeling. In an instant, the aura of great Tao filled the whole area, and an incomprehensible voice of the universe rang out from Wang Ling's body. This is impossible. How can this be? At that moment, the Heartless Patriarch felt his worldview shatter. He couldn't believe that such a voice had actually come from Wang Ling's body. Furthermore, it was the voice of multiple great Tao. This voice, which could only be transmitted in the universe, had actually come from a teenager's body. So what did this mean? This meant that this youth's body might be the embodiment of the universe. Of course, this was just the heartless patriarch's own guess. He could not imagine that such an outrageous thing would happen in front of him. Truly, it was outrageous in the capital. This was a very astonishing sight. When Wang Ling spat out this primordial essence mixed with the power of chaos onto the ground of this supreme world, a great Tao lotus actually appeared out of thin air. Heavenly Tao, Fate Tao, Shadow Tao, Divine Tao, all kinds of great Taos turned into lotus petals that held up this great Tao lotus from the ground. It was only now that everyone from Battle Sect realized that apart from the powers of these great Taos, Wang Ling actually had more great Taos. Because this lotus of great Tao had a total of 28 petals. When the great Tao lotus directly rose from the ground, Wang Ling's eyelids twitched, because he never thought that he would actually have 28 kinds of great Tao. Could it be that the grand Tao he cultivated in was too powerful, and it suppressed the other grand Taos, causing him to be unable to notice it normally? Although Wang Ling's expression was as tranquil as an ancient well, he was extremely shocked in his heart. He clearly remembered that when he had forced back the demon world's attack 6 years ago, his great Tao lotus had only had 2 petals. He never thought that today, 6 years later, it would already have 28 petals. Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh at such a barbaric growth. But even he didn't expect the great Tao lotus to have already grown to this extent by the time he released it again. For the others, this was naturally even more stunning. When the lotus bud bloomed, a slender and elegant crystal fairy revealed her graceful figure in the heart of the lotus. Her entire body was crystal clear, and her face couldn't be seen. Her extremely graceful body was draped in a thin layer of gauze, and she looked peerless. She was clearly no more than 3 inches tall, but at that moment, she was radiating astonishing spirit power. The moment she opened her eyes, boundless spirit light was released, and a terrible light swept out in all directions, illuminating this supreme world. Don't be presumptuous in my territory. The heartless patriarch couldn't take it anymore. He was well aware of how powerful Wang Ling was, but he couldn't just stand by and watch Wang Ling act presumptuously here. This was clearly his world, and he was the master and god here, but a hothead had turned the tables on him. Didn't he want to lose face? Today, even if I have to pay any price, I will kill you. At that moment, Heartless' state of mind had changed. At first, he had planned to turn Wang Ling and Wang Nuan into specimens for his collection, but now he couldn't care less, he just wanted to do whatever he could to kill them. This great Tao lotus was extraordinary, but most of the great Taos weren't Wang Ling's main Taos, so Heartless thought that it might not be as strong as he had imagined. He pushed the fluctuations of the god brain to the maximum, intending to form a spiritual link with the entire supreme world. Then, instilled with the vast will of the world, a terrible creature broke through the ground. It had been forcibly summoned by him using the power of the god brain and the will of the world. It was also a terrible monster that Heartless had created through his continuous research. This tall and sturdy creature had countless faces, and the most obvious one was actually a dragon head with tentacles growing out of it. A long dragon neck stretched out from its bloated body and spewed chaotic flames. It was surrounded by arms and claws, like a combination of all kinds of ultimate creatures, and gave off a strong sense of oppression. Like the great Tao lotus, this strange multi-faced creature also had the power of multiple great Taos. What's this? Asked grenade-throwing senior immortal. I never thought he would even capture the spirit of Taoist Long's Dharma idol, and also capture so many indescribable creatures from the great Tao sect, and combine them together. Monk Golden Lamp was equally horrified. But when he turned to look at Wang Ling's calm expression on the battlefield, he was completely relieved. Indeed, by finding creatures with different great Taos and then combining them, they could indeed achieve a similar effect as the great Tao lotus in Wang Ling's hand. But the difference was that these great Taos weren't the Heartless Patriarch's own. This person still didn't know anything about power. At that moment, Wang Nuan, who had been lying on Wang Ling's shoulder the whole time, was also eager to try it out. She raised her hands and gave instructions as she spoke to the fairy that the great Tao lotus had evolved into. What is spiritual Master Nuan saying? Most people in Battle Sect didn't understand. Only Loopy Toad understood. Little girl Nguyen is telling that Tao Lotus Fairy to start fighting, everyone. Chapter 1690. The aura released by these lotuses of great Tao was so astonishing that it was beyond ordinary people's imagination. Although the dragon head monstrosity in front of him had the same composition as Fairy Tao Lotus, the difference in aura was still very obvious. Especially after Tao Lotus Fairy entered battle mode at Wang Nuan's command. As the fairy, who was only a few inches tall, swung her lotus dress, a powerful aura of great Tao spread out in an instant, shaking the entire world and affecting the nomological laws of this supreme world. The aura under the lotus dress was endless, and it carried a kind of power that could pry open everything. The overflowing power of chaos shuttled through the void, causing time and space to flow as if it carried a kind of power of disorder. Boom! The dragon head monster summoned by the Wuxin ancestor made its move at that moment. One of the dragon claws in its body was like a tentacle that suddenly extended infinitely from its body and grabbed at Tao Lotus Fairy. The earth and sky were turned upside down with one claw, and it was incomparably fierce as it covered Tao Lotus Fairy. Tao Lotus Fairy didn't say a word. She closed her eyes slightly, and with a kind of peerless aura, she stretched out her slender little finger with only a few inches of her body. In an instant, everyone seemed to see a divine moon appear behind Tao Lotus Fairy. Cold, bright, and insufferably arrogant, there was a mythical aura spreading. She aimed her telepathic finger at the dragon claw. In the eyes of the people of Battle Sect, Tao Lotus Fairy's finger was so small that it was almost the size of a sesame seed in front of the huge dragon claw. However, when this sesame seed-sized finger collided with the dragon claw actually exploded into pieces on the spot. It was directly smashed into pieces. The power of just one finger had easily smashed the mountain-like dragon claw of the dragon head monster. Although the Tao Lotus Fairy that Wang Ling had summoned was small, her power was indeed unparalleled. After the dragon claw was smashed, the pain of the backlash was quickly reflected on the Wuxin ancestor. He started to feel pain in his brain, and he should have directly spat out a mouthful of blood, but when the blood reached his mouth, he swallowed it back into his stomach. As a primordial one, he didn't want to lose his composure in this kind of situation. He didn't want to be in such a sorry state. However, Wang Ling's strength was still far beyond his imagination. He even started to feel a little desperate. He couldn't figure out how such a person could survive in this world. He was less than 20 years old, but had so many great Taos. Although Wuxin didn't show it, there was already a clear fear in his eyes. Although this gaze was fleeting, Wang Ling still managed to catch it. In a confrontation between experts, it was a battle of momentum. Once such a look appeared, then it meant that Wang Ling's defeat was already decided. In order to better protect Wang Nuan, he hadn't done it himself, and had instead summoned the great Tao Lotus Fairy to take care of it for him. He was clearly aware of Fairy Tao Lotus combat strength, so he wasn't worried at all about the outcome of this battle. Boom! Perhaps it was because she caught the trace of fear in Wu Xian's eyes, Fairy Tao Lotus acted decisively again. She still didn't speak a single word. She directly broke free from the remaining Tao Lotuses, and she transformed into the most dazzling shooting star that soared into the sky. After that, she used her slender leg to fiercely slap the body of the dragon head sewn monster, causing an enormous explosion to resound, and it caused everyone to be extremely shocked. No one doubted the power of this kick. It was so strong and fierce that it could break everything as it swept across the battlefield. The dragon head-stitched monster suffered a painful blow, and the countless faces on its body began to distort. Endless wails rang out from all directions. Tao Lotus Fairy's kick directly caused the monster's huge body to cave in. The dozens of faces on the monster's huge body seemed to have been crushed by something as they twisted into a ball. Whoa! The heartless patriarch finally couldn't bear the pain of the backlash. The blood he had just swallowed surged out of his body again, and he spat it out on the spot. At the same time, he felt a sharp pain in his head, as if it was going to split open on the spot. On the other side, Tao Lotus Fairy, who had activated her battle mode, was ruthless. Her small figure moved rhythmically as she split into several shadows that attacked the monster from all directions. With each kick, the heartless patriarch vomited a mouthful of blood. After 4 kicks, the heartless patriarch fell from the sky to the ground like a meteor that had lost its light as he knelt on the ground. His originally delicate and handsome face was no longer so, and he began to look old. Each of Tao Lotus Fairy's kicks was so powerful that they could shatter stars and break a person's time. It was only then that Heartless realized that among the 28 great Tao that Wang Ling possessed, there was actually one, the legendary Time Tao. Although it wasn't his main great Tao, it was the Tao that controlled eternal life. It was a Tao that he had always dreamed of mastering. This young man had clearly comprehended this great Tao, but hadn't regarded it as his main great Tao, and had instead set it aside. The heartless patriarch found it hard to believe. Thus, each of Tao Lotus Fairy's kicks carried the power of time. One kick after another, she kicked the heartless patriarch from his delicate and handsome appearance into a doddering old vegetable. He couldn't even stand steadily as he knelt on one knee and shivered. The wrinkles on his face were especially obvious, and he instantly lost all his dignity. As an ancient being, Heartless was extremely ashamed and resentful. This was such a misfortune, and even more so, a great humiliation. I haven't lost yet. Tao Lotus Fairy didn't waste any words. Even though Heartless had been reduced to such a miserable state, she still showed no mercy. After activating battle mode, she would only follow Wang Ling's instructions to complete her task. Bang! With another flick of her finger, she used the primordial finger on the face of the dragon-headed stitched monster. In an instant, the entire land of the Supreme World split open, and like a cake being cut, it was sliced into tiny grids, densely packed and evenly divided piece by piece. A huge amount of energy directly seeped in and instantly disintegrated the stitched monster into pieces. Countless pieces of flesh exploded, and then turned into powder bit by bit as the power of chaos seeped in. Puff! The heartless patriarch spurted out blood again. Unable to resist, he fell to the ground. There was basically no suspense in this kind of battle. From the moment Tao Lotus Fairy made her move, it was already predetermined. From the moment Wang Ling decided to kill Heartless at all costs, he had already taken the initiative. He didn't have the strength to resist at all, and the violent beating left everyone in battle sect dumbfounded. After confirming that the Heartless Patriarch had been completely beaten to the ground and couldn't get up again, Tao Lotus Fairy returned to the Great Tao Lotus. Then, the petals of the lotus closed again and turned into a bolt of light that was sucked back into Wang Ling's king's eye. That's it. Everyone in battle sect was suspicious. Of course not. Earlier, this was just Tao Lotus Fairy's performance. It wasn't Wang Ling's turn yet. Although the heartless patriarch in front of him was already a dying dog, Wang Ling didn't intend to show any mercy at all this time. Bang! Bang! Another 2 loud bangs rang out. Wang Ling brought Wang Nuan with him. The brother and sister pair gave the heartless patriarch another slap. This ancient being who had clamored to turn them into specimens. Finally, at this moment, as the Supreme World fell apart, it turned into a meat patty and stopped breathing forever. Chapter 1691. The Heartless Patriarch's death could only be described as tragic. When Wang Ling and Wang Nuan moved their palms away, his body was already completely unrecognizable as a human. Because this Supreme World was in an alternate space and not on Earth, it was a completely outside the law, so Wang Ling hadn't had much to worry about. If this had happened on Earth, he might have been sentenced for excessive self-defense under existing cultivation laws. Furthermore, he and Wang Nuan had each received a palm strike. The destructive power of this brother-sister combination palm technique was too strong, and there was no way to clean up the mess. The Supreme World has collapsed. It seems that the heartless ancestor is really dead, Xiang Yi said after sensing the aura fluctuations in the space. After all, it was Ling Junren and spiritual master Nuan's palms. When each of them received a palm strike, it was like the hearts of young men who had been rejected. Monk Jin Dang said at that moment. Hearts of young men. That's right. These hearts of young men are like a crushed plastic bottle. This kind of wound can never be repaired. Not necessarily, Loopy Toad added at that moment. Why do you say that, little François? Jean Dang was puzzled. Isn't it just a crushed plastic bottle? I just need to blow on it. Everyone, Lotus Sun and Kamiya Ryoko were the only ones who looked bewildered and didn't know what to say. Elsewhere, in the illusory realm of nothingness, the last group of people who were still dealing with the indescribable creatures swiftly received news of the heartless ancestor's death. Li Xian and Zhang Zipei had been sent to use the special little corpse wrapping picture to collect the creatures. At that moment, they had successfully completed their task and returned victorious. They moved extremely quickly and followed Wang Ling's instructions without the slightest bit of sloppiness. Who would have thought that just as they were about to report back to Wang Ming, the heartless ancestor would also die at the same time? A confrontation between experts was just this plain and boring. As expected of Ling Junren. Although Li Xian and Zhang Zipei had already anticipated how the victor of this battle would be, they never thought that the heartless ancestor, who was said to be invincible after activating his god brain 100%, would actually die so quickly. I'll have to trouble you two seniors to bring the little corpse wrapping picture to Ling Ling. Wang Ming had already possessed Jia Bugui's body for some time, and had fused his brain waves earlier. At that moment, his face looked a little strange. How is Mr. Ming? I feel like you're not feeling well. It's within my expectations. After all, the brainwaves in this body are only a small part of my main body, so I won't be able to hold on for long. Wang Ming said, in order to hide myself completely, I even fused my will with the original owner of this body. But as time passes, the original owner's will return. I'll be kicked out. What do we do now? I discovered some interesting things in this illusory realm of nothingness and this enormous imperial city. It'll be helpful for my own research. Speaking up to this point, Wang Ming took out a deep blue crystal card from his clothes. This was the copy crystal card that he had made when Li Xian and Zhang Ziyan were on a mission. It could copy his current brainwave state and transfer it to the card. How about this? Take this crystal card with you. The crystal card contains some information that I have obtained from the illusory void. When we get back, just give it to my real body, Wang Ming said. Li Xian and Zhang Ziyan looked at each other, then raised their hands in salute. Yes, Mr. Ming. Wang Ming's current state was actually equivalent to a small clone spell. After the mission was completed, his clone would disappear and his brainwaves would dissipate, which was very normal. Now that the Heartless Patriarch had been dealt with, there was no one to manage the illusory void and the entire imperial city, so Battle's sect naturally had jurisdiction. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal wanted to wait until the situation in the imperial city was stabilized before handing it over to Huaxiao Alliance. If Huaxiao Alliance didn't want it, he could directly use the geographical location to open a Battle sect branch or something. Wang Ling snapped his fingers and everyone was moved back into the imperial city. Immortal Toya had already been waiting here for a long time. Although the mission this time had been relatively successful, some people had still been injured. Thus, after receiving a notification from Li Xian and Zhang Ziyan's clone, he had swiftly followed them into the imperial city. Right now, the imperial city was in a state of chaos. In the absence of order, the gate of the imperial city was wide open. Countless rich people in the core area drove their carriages to the slums and began to fight for a safe place with the poor people there. Of course, these problems would be resolved after Battle's sect took over, and peace would be restored to this technology city as soon as possible. At the same time, the Chaos ship rudder was also brought back. After seeing its master, the Heartless Patriarch, suffer such a miserable death, the Chaos ship wasn't stupid, and knew that it would be useless if it stubbornly resisted. Thus, the artifact spirit of the Chaos ship spoke for the first time, its voice full of fear. Don't turn me into a milk bottle, Loopy Toad rolled its eyes. It's just a milk bottle, I'm not going to kill you. I was a toad back then, and it's actually not bad to change my appearance. But I still don't want to be made into a milk bottle, my master is kind and merciful, he made you into a milk bottle to give you a chance to redeem yourself. Otherwise, tell me, what use are you? But there are a lot of materials in the world that can be used to make milk bottles, but they're not as sturdy as you. Loopy Toad continued to persuade it earnestly. You're the one who gave you face when my master took a fancy to you. As for the other materials you mentioned, they're nothing more than paper straws in milk tea shops. They can't be inserted, they can't be sucked, and they'll even go soft halfway. Everyone, Lotus-san and Ryoko Kwamiya were the only ones who looked bewildered and didn't know what Loopy Toad was saying. So, I advise you to give up resisting, said Loopy Toad. The Chaos Ship rudder was in despair. Its original function was to change the trajectory of all things, but if it became a milk bottle, its function would probably change along with its appearance. Yeah. Wang Nuan suddenly said at that moment. As a level 10 expert in baby language, Loopy Toad quickly translated Wang Nuan's words. Our spiritual master Nuan said that your function won't be changed. Even if it's a milk bottle, it can still be a ship rudder. As long as your body is hollowed out. Hollowed out, that's right, hollowed out to look like a container, and then put a pacifier on top. When you drink it, you can hold it close to you, and it'll be more stable. The Chaos Ship rudder sighed in its heart. It knew that now that things had come to this, it was already doomed. There was no way it could escape being made into a milk bottle. Furthermore, it didn't have any room to struggle or resist. As for the rest of the battle sect members, most of them were just watching the show. Of course, there was one person who was thinking about something else at that moment. Lotus-san's mind was currently filled with Wang Ling's birthday present. It was just that she hadn't decided what to give him yet. If it was possible. Chapter 1692. She had never worried about a single gift in the past, because there were too many gifts that could be bought with money in this world. But when it came to Wang Ling, she still wanted to give him something special. At the very least, it had to be something that reflected her sincerity and feelings. After all, a gift that could be bought with money wasn't sincerity. When she was very young, Sunny Yuan had taught her that for cultivators of Huaxiao Nation, giving gifts was in fact a very particular thing. There was also a great deal of courtesy in the gift, and it wasn't without reason that the traditional culture of reciprocity had lasted for thousands of years. Reasonable courtesy in return was an important lesson in interpersonal relationships, and was different from simply giving a gift directly. And it wasn't that the more expensive the gift, the better, the key was suitability. Nowadays, more and more people misunderstood the meaning of gift-giving, and often changed the meaning as you gave it. She hadn't believed this before, and it wasn't until now that she realized how unfathomable this knowledge was. It turned out that, when you like someone, you'll really be in a dilemma when it comes to choosing a gift. The more you cared, the more you liked someone. And the more you liked someone, the more you hesitated. After about 20 minutes, Wang Ling had transformed the Chaos Ship's rudder into a milk bottle in the shape of a rudder, and at the same time, he had turned the Chaos Glow which he had put away earlier into milk powder for brewing. The color of this nutritious Chaos milk was very beautiful, and it was actually rainbow-colored. Holding the milk bottle, little girl Nuan gulped down the milk, her soft little face full of happiness. It looks delicious. Resting her hands on her knees, Ryoko Kamiya looked at Wang Nuan drinking milk. No girl who saw this scene wouldn't feel overflowing with maternal instincts. She thought Wang Nuan was too cute. For a moment, she even had the dangerous thought of having a baby with Odd Jua, as expected of spiritual master Nuan. Only Ling Jinren's and spiritual master Nuan's physiques can withstand this chaos milk. Monk Golden Lamp's eyes curved into a smile. To Wang Ling and Wang Nuan, milk powder brewed with Chaos Glow didn't seem like much, but this kind of milk actually had a strong aftereffect and could easily go to the head. If someone else drank it, even if it was just a mouthful, it would feel like they had been forced to drink hard liquor. If their physiques were slightly weaker and they drank too much, it was very easy for energy to overflow and cause their bodies to explode. So, Senior Golden Lamp means that my body will explode? Hearing this, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's interest was piqued. This can also be considered unlocking a new way to die, which will be very helpful for improving my courting death Tao scripture. As expected of a perfected cultivator, when the rest of the battle sect heard this, they all exclaimed in surprise. This great death-courting senior was now on the path of constantly unlocking new ways to die, unable to extricate himself. Since ancient times, it was unheard of to increase the intensity of one's cultivation through constant death. Although he would be resurrected. But the pain of death could still be felt. There were all kinds of ways to die, some of them even had to die in excruciating pain. Based on a normal person's train of thought, no matter how strong the courting death Tao Sutra was, it was impossible for them to learn such a method to increase their cultivation. As for Wang Ling and grenade-throwing senior immortal, it could only be said that one dared to teach and the other dared to learn. Of course, if grenade-throwing senior immortal succeeded in his studies in the end, his combat strength would be unparalleled. In the later stages, as long as he unlocked a new way to die, the increase in his combat strength would be much greater than the accumulation of experience that a monk would gain in one reincarnation. At that time, for grenade-throwing senior immortal, one death was equivalent to one reincarnation. Furthermore, a monk would need to endure the experience of his current life before he could enter the next reincarnation. Just the growth potential alone was a different story. Senior immortal, it's done. Qin Zong and I have already set up Battle Sect's transmission array according to your instructions. It connects directly from Battle Sect's true venerated hall to the main hall of the castle in Imperial City, Xiang Yi said at that moment, carrying a black sniper rifle case on his back. He and Qin Zong had worked together to smoothly set up this green passageway. The follow-up work was to wait for Battle Sect to completely take over the current situation in the Technology City. But there was one thing that was a little unfortunate for now. After this incident in the illusory land of nothingness, he and Qin Zong wouldn't be able to stay here for long. Grenade-throwing senior immortal was already used to observing people's expressions, and he could tell what Qin Zong and Xiang Yi were thinking. He immediately said, "After this ordeal, both of you are already guest elders of my battle sect. If you don't mind, why don't you stay here for a few more days? In any case, when you go back, Brother Ling can send you back to the previous world line, and you can even specify a time point. It won't affect you. Is that really okay?" Hearing this, their eyes flickered. They looked at Wang Ling, who shrugged nonchalantly. Of course, Wang Ling wouldn't have agreed to an ordinary person's request. But Qin Zong and Xiang Yi, they were special cases. "Thank you so much, Ling Zhenren and Senior Immortal." Both of them immediately bowed and nodded. It wasn't often that they could stay by Wang Ling's side and learn like this. Although the green transmission passageway had already been set up, because of the twists and turns in the space, the internal structure of the passageway was very complicated, so a third-party medium was needed for the transmission. Wang Ling directly reorganized the Rubik's cubes that were used to seal the living creatures into something similar to a space elevator. The space inside was incredibly large and could hold up to a maximum of 100 trillion tons. Battle Sect was divided into two groups. One group would stay behind to connect with them, and the other would go back to share information on the Technology City. Because he needed to take care of little girl Nguan, Wang Ling didn't go back right away. Contrary to his expectations, this time, Lotus Sun actually didn't think of any way to get on the same flight as him. She directly pulled Kamiya Ryoko's hand into the elevator, looking like she was in a hurry to get back. "Wang Ling, see you on Earth." Before she left, she was still full of smiles as she greeted him in a natural and unrestrained manner. As soon as the elevator doors closed, she immediately dialed Sun Yiyuan's number. Kamiya Ryoko was startled. "You can even get a signal like this?" Chua smiled. Senior Golden Lamp has already blessed Masteress's phone, so it's not a problem at all for the signal to cross dimensions. You can even make calls from the third dimension to the second dimension. That is to say, you can talk to those fictional anime characters. In theory, it's completely possible, Chua said. If my Shifu enlightens us, we might even be able to bring those fictional anime characters out. On the side, Zhou Zi was also shocked when he heard this. He knew that Ajua had planned all this so that he could smoothly become Master Wang's disciple and gain the approval of that Master Wang outside. After this incident, it could be said that Zhou Ziyi's view of the world had been completely refreshed. His grandmaster was too strong, so strong that he even wondered if he was human. Chapter 1693. Chaos, darkness, and the fear of drowning. This kind of pain was an after-effect of anyone who had fought Wang Ling. The second before he was killed by Wang Ling, the heartless patriarch had used the last of his strength to separate his brain waves and become something drifting in the universe. He originally wanted to silently enter the consciousness of the battle sect members on the field and patiently wait for the counterattack. However, the moment he separated from the consciousness, the battle sect members' consciousness suddenly exploded. However, the moment he separated his brain waves, they were captured by an inexplicable force, as if they had been wrapped up in an impenetrable net. Who are you? Heartless found it hard to believe that he had been caught. Like you, we are Avengers waiting for the right time. That laughter rang out directly from the depths of his mind. However, he was too weak at the moment, and he was unable to completely discard this voice. The most important thing right now is to restore your god brain. The voice continued, but your body is no longer there, do you have a way? Heartless asked. Intuitively, he could tell that the person who had captured him definitely wasn't on Wang Ling's side. Also, for some reason, he had a strong intuition. He felt that the person he was talking to had also been persecuted by Wang Ling. This was an interaction between victims. Although they didn't know each other well, there was a wonderful telepathic connection between them. It's not hard to solve the problem of the body. I have time cells. After the god brain recovers, I can use the power of time and memory to change you back to your original appearance. At that moment, another voice rang out in his mind. Who are you? Heartless was puzzled. Both of us are victims. You just need to know that we will help you. But the god brain is already broken, and what I have here is only a portion of the brain waves that were separated from it. Restoring it is easier said than done. Actually, it's not that difficult. We just need to find a suitable match, the grave god said. The grave goddess said, and this match is actually on Earth. If the current you were to possess someone's body, how long would you be able to maintain it? No more than an hour at most. That's enough. Baizha nodded and said in unison with the grave god, next, we will help you transfer this memory of yours to another person without anyone noticing. Who? This is a citizen of your city. He's also a wealthy merchant in the core area. His name is Jia Bugui. Jia Bugui. Wu seemed to have some impression of this person. But he couldn't figure out why it was him. Looks like you still don't know that your world has long been invaded by brainwaves. Baizha laughed. This person's name is Wang Ming, and he's one of our future opponents. So what's the plan now? This person is extremely compatible with you, so as long as you cooperate with us to complete this plan of swapping the crown prince with a civet cat without anyone noticing, let your brainwaves enter his body quietly, and then possess his body. Baizha said, of course, it's not as if there are no conditions to achieve all of this. Then, let's talk about the conditions. Wu Xian knew that in his current situation, he actually had no other choice. Join us. Baizha and the tomb gods said in unison, we are called the Avengers of the Old Ones. On the way to the space elevator, Lotus Sun called Sunny Yuan, the head of the Sun family, and there was a hint of urgency in her voice. Grandpa, I want to ask you, she hadn't wanted to trouble old man Sun at first, but the situation was urgent. Wang Ling's birthday was coming up, and she was flustered as she didn't know what to give him to express her feelings. You said you want to give classmate Wang Ling a present, but you don't know what to give him. Sunny Yuan was also stumped by this question. He knew Wang Ling's personality, and it definitely wouldn't do to be too conspicuous and high-profile. How about we give him an aircraft carrier? Sunny Yuan said seriously after thinking for a bit. Aircraft carrier, Lotus Sun instantly choked on the words she had yet to say. Grandpa, isn't this too high-profile? How is this high-profile? It's just a yacht. I didn't give him a spaceship or anything like that. Lotus-san was speechless. It seemed that her grandfather had some misunderstanding about keeping a low profile. However, with the Sun family's wealth, which was comparable to that of a country, an aircraft carrier was indeed like a yacht. There were no less than 60 aircraft carriers parked in the port that cooperated with Huaguo Water Curtain Group. But Grandpa, even if this isn't too high profile for you, Grandpa. But gifts that can be bought with money aren't sincere, Lotus-san said. After saying this, Sun Yuan nodded meaningfully. Oh, that's true. In that case, why don't I give you some rustic words of love? Rustic words of love? Lotus-san was puzzled. For example, Rongrong, what's your favorite wine? Sun Yuan asked. Grandpa, I'm still a student, I know. So, this is just an example. Sun Yuan said, suppose you said these words to classmate Wang Ling. Classmate Wang Ling definitely won't know how to answer, so when the time comes, you can act according to the circumstances and confess. Then what should I say next? Lotus-san asked. This question is very simple. Loopy Toad sighed. Of course it's with your forever as earth, wine. Lotus-san and the others, Sun Yuan, for another example, you can tell classmate Wang Ling that you're Ling Air and he's Ding Dang. Loopy Toad, because jingle bells, jingle. Lotus-san and the others, Loopy Toad, oh, that's right, I know of another rustic word of love. You can say that you're the immortal of sword and fairy and he's the legend of chivalry. Because it's the legend of sword and fairy and knight. Lotus-san and the others, question mark. Although Lotus-san didn't really understand, she felt that there was something wrong with Loopy Toad. After asking a few more times and not getting the answer she wanted, Lotus-san hung up the phone in disappointment. The main reason was that she felt that if she kept talking, her thoughts would collapse even more. Kamiya Ryoko suggested, seriously, Rongrong, do you want to give yourself away and give Wang Ling a surprise? Lotus-san's face instantly turned red. Will that really work? To be honest, that was what she had thought before, but she didn't know if it would work. I think it will. Kamiya Ryoko continued to come up with a plan. Look, when the time comes, you can find an excuse and say that classmate Wang Ling's crispy noodle snacks won a prize. In addition to giving him a limited edition crispy noodle snack, you can also throw in a big beautifully wrapped gift box, but you're hiding in the big gift box.